Welcome to this global startup ecosystem event for innovation policy and ecosystem building leaders. We appreciate each of you joining us today, along with leaders from around 100 countries. Over the next 3 hours, we'll have leaders from 25 countries sharing insights about how to accelerate startup ecosystems in a post-COVID world. We're thrilled to have contribution from senior leaders such as Bo-Yon Huang, Deputy Mayor for Economy at the Seoul Metropolitan Government, Prince Constantine, Envoy at TechLeap in the Netherlands, Manabu Miyasaka, Vice Governor at the Tokyo Metropolitan Government. This event is produced by Startup Genome with the priceless collaboration of our partner, Global Entrepreneurship Network. Startup Genome is the world-leading policy advisory organization for public and private agencies working to accelerate the success of their startup ecosystem. We've advised and in the process learned from more than 100 clients across 50 countries to date. Our mission is to accelerate the growth of startup ecosystems through proven policies and rooted in practice, so every society builds an engine of job creation for its population and captures its fair share of the new economy. Our impact is rooted in more than a decade of independent research across 280 cities, assessing 3 million businesses, and in providing policy and strategic advice, as well as sharing insights with our members through monthly member meeting, policy forums, and connecting directly leaders from our member ecosystem so they learn from each other and can discuss collaborations. A few weeks ago, we launched the GSER 2021 on main stage at London Tech Week, produced with our partner, the Global Entrepreneurship Network. And the GSER is the most comprehensive and widespread report on startup ecosystems, reaching close to 500,000 entrepreneurs and investors worldwide. The report includes a ranking of the top 140 ecosystems. And this year, we restructured around a continental and regional approach where you have key insights from each region's rankings, and also added funder-focused articles from thought leaders and successful entrepreneurs such as Jeff Hoffman. Next, our team is preparing to launch a world-first clean tech global startup ecosystem ranking. And today with this event, we're launching the first life sciences global startup ecosystem report in partnership with LaunchVic. Now, Jonathan Ortmans, president of the Global Entrepreneurship Network, will say a few words. Jonathan.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff, and thanks to all the team at Startup Genome at the Global Entrepreneurship Network, or Gen Global. We are so proud to have worked with you over so many years in helping to really dig deep into understanding the DNA of what's working and what's not working in these interventions to empower our entrepreneurs through smarter ecosystems and smart innovation policy. This is an incredibly important time to get it right. This pandemic was tailor-made for a global response, but it didn't get one. So the recovery has to be global. It's one that has to look at all the regions of the world. How can we do this together? And how can we work in ensuring that we help our entrepreneurs who are excellent in this environment of uncertainty and lack of predictability in helping us to have confidence and indeed to build back a better, more equitable, more inclusive, and frankly, more prosperous world for more citizens. At Gen, we're super proud of our work with Genome. We also, as you may know, will be having Global Entrepreneurship Week to rally communities around the world in almost every nation on earth in November. We'll have the Global Entrepreneurship Congress, where we'll be convening everybody live at the last week of March in 2022. And we'll be doing things ranging from TV shows to our Entrepreneurship World Cup to a whole range of startup community programs. But at the end of the day, the most important thing we do is indeed in this research and policy area, because it's vitally important that with the help of Startup Genome and the World Bank and some of the other institutions that we work closely with, we're able to make sure that we give smart advice to those people that are trying to make the path easier for more people to start and scale a firm. So thank you. You're going to hear today from people from Europe, from the Middle East, from Africa, from Asia, From the Americas and from Oceania, you'll hear some super smart people, and we look forward to getting into the program now. JF.
Thank you, Jonathan. And now next, we will be presenting key insights from the Global Startup Ecosystem Report, the GSER 2021. Let's get started.
Thank you, JF and Jonathan, for kicking us off today. We have a great program planned for you all. Now, we'll take a closer look at major findings of the GSER 2021 with the Startup Genome team.
Since our first global research and report in 2011, we've been talking about the global startup revolution, and now it is clear to everyone that it will soon become the most important engine of our economies everywhere. Startup ecosystems, whilst being young, already have created 6 out of the 10 largest corporations in the world. The global startup economy is now worth over $3.8 trillion, more than the individual GDP of most G7 economies. That's not counting startups exited before 2018. 91 ecosystems had unicorns in 2020, about 3 times the number of 2 years ago. One thing that excites me is the regionalization of tech ecosystems, which allowed the smaller cities in the top 100 emerging startup ecosystems to collectively create more than 540 billion in ecosystem value, an incredible 55% increase compared to the period from 2017 to the first half of 19. Tech also amply demonstrated its importance in moments of crisis, as just experienced during the height of the global pandemic, where tech entrepreneurs around the world helped to keep our societies going and are now driving the economic recovery. There are now 79 ecosystems generating over 4 billion in value, which is more than double the number identified in 2017.
Let me share some of the exciting results with regards to the top ranking, starting with London, where we launched our Global Startup Ecosystem Report and is tied in second place with New York City. We congratulate Tokyo with an impressive rise of 6 ranks to number 9, and Seoul, Toronto, Waterloo, and Montreal that have all climbed 4 ranks to respectively reach the number 14, 16, and 31st to 35th ranks. Shenzhen moved up 3 spots to enter the top 20 at 19. And the darling of our report this year is Philadelphia, that having had a few big exits, moved up an impressive 15 ranks to number 28. So while North America continues to dominate the top 30 global ranking, Asia has continued to rise and now is taking 30% of the top spots. Let's go to continental review now, with Africa first, and where we celebrate the fact that early stage funding has doubled in only 2.5 years. And the value of the top 5 startup ecosystems is now $6 billion, led by Cape Town, Lagos, Johannesburg, Nairobi, and Accra in the top 5 spots. In the MENA regions, AI and big data is the leading subsector, with $3 billion invested in early stage funding, that's seed and Series A only, in 2 years, led by the top 5 of Tel Aviv, Dubai, Cairo, Riyadh, and Abu Dhabi, with Bahrain as a close challenger. In Latin America, late stage funding has grown 5x in 5 years, with the top ecosystems being Sao Paulo, Mexico City, Bogota, Buenos Aires, and Santiago, Valparaiso. In Asia, startup ecosystems are now worth $1.1 trillion, and its top cities continues their rise in the ranking, with Beijing, Shanghai, Tokyo, and Seoul, as we mentioned before, and Singapore taking the top spots. In Oceania, startup ecosystems are now worth $30 billion, with 90% of it concentrated in Sydney, Melbourne, and New Zealand, with Brisbane and Perth taking the 4th and 5th spot, while Adelaide and Canberra Far being our regional challengers. In Europe, we celebrate a strong community, which is a key ingredient, the foundation of startup ecosystems, with London, Berlin, and Amsterdam taking 3 of the top 5 spots when it comes to connectedness. The average ecosystem value created by European startup ecosystem is now $6.3 billion, which is the highest after North America. And also, Europe is taking the largest share of the top 100 emerging ecosystems. So policy is working in elevating and creating engines of job creation and economic growth all over the continent. The top spots this year go to London, Paris, Amsterdam, Stockholm, and Berlin, with Copenhagen following closely. Finally, in North America, the top performers are, no surprise, Silicon Valley, New York City, Boston, Los Angeles, and Seattle, with Miami and Houston as regional challengers.
In addition to these regional trends, let's look at the life cycle of the different technology subsectors and understand which ones are actually driving the global startup revolution we're talking about today. This year, we see AI taking the lead, growing the most rapidly in exits and Series A funding, with AMR ranking second, that's advanced manufacturing and robotics, followed by blockchain and clean tech. We see gaming is clearly coming back up in exit growth, and of course, edtech with an E, with a fast growth in exits, much accelerated by the COVID crisis and the new global need for virtual solutions. More than ever, it is important for us to talk about the importance of clean tech. While it has been a record year for global startup ecosystems and we're really working towards economic recovery, it is high time for all of us to put our innovative and entrepreneurial talent back to work to help save our planet from climate change. Building back better is not a choice. I invite all of you to join our Entrepreneurship for Climate movement, which we recently launched with partners all over the world. Together, we commit to fostering global tech leaders and drive the net zero economy, because without those, we really cannot achieve the impact we need to see during the next 10 years. You can find the full report with all of these insights at startupgenome.com/GSER 2021.
Up next, we move on to the Global Startup Ecosystem Report Life Sciences Edition launch with JF.
I'm excited to launch the much anticipated 2021 Global Startup Ecosystem Report Edition Life Sciences in partnership with Launchvik. We've been studying life sciences for several years now, and we've entered a particularly exciting period for entrepreneurial innovation in the sector, with two major factors creating unique opportunities for growth and disruption. First, the rise of software technologies within the sector, which is dramatically impacting the speed and cost of development and opening new vectors of performance in many technology and product categories. Harry Glorikian writes about this in the report. Secondly, the COVID crisis, which has brought so much resource and revenue growth to the life sciences sector and made it the fastest growing sector or subsector among those qualified of mature. This creates a lot of fluidity in the ecosystem rankings, and we'll talk about that soon. And this means governments, agencies, and ecosystem leaders have the chance to accelerate the growth of their life sciences sector through aggressive policy and investments, and start creating global category leaders that will have an outsized economic impact on their city's economy. I say aggressive because there is competition. Many governments, including those we work with, have identified the size of the opportunity and have been investing aggressively. Now let's talk about the ranking exemplify the fluidity I referred to. Among the top 5 ecosystems, we saw movement, with New York and London moving up past San Diego, both of them as a result of several years of strong policy action. The most impressive rise in the rankings is Philadelphia, that shot up to the global top 8 position from outside the top 35. Seoul has moved up to the top 15, while Copenhagen has gone up 9 ranks to end up at a very impressive number 22, and Melbourne went up 8 ranks to end up at just number 24. Finally, we see Tokyo entering the top 25 and Montreal the top 35. I told you there was a lot of fluidity in the ecosystem ranking, and it's a great opportunity for action and greater investments for you policymakers and agency leaders. Behind those changes are the doubling of exits, larger investment rounds, and higher valuations, with Series B deal size going up 4x in 10 years, and an increase of almost 50% in number of life sciences unicorns in the first half of 2021 alone, with 108 unicorns globally. And while there's still concentration, with 49% of life sciences unicorns having been created in the top 5 ecosystems, it is also rapidly decentralizing, and we celebrate that because this is our mission at Startup Genome. Overall, 48% of the top 25 ecosystems are based in North America, with Canada having 3, Vancouver, Toronto, Waterloo, and Montreal. Europe counts 6 of the top performing ecosystems, while Asia counts 5, and MENA and Oceania both have 1, Tel Aviv and Melbourne. Speaking of policy action, we've been working with LaunchVic for several years now to help shape policy, and it's been very rewarding to work with such an action-oriented agency committed to growth and performance. As we saw the rise of Melbourne in the last 2 years, we invited them to join us in this report and include a special review of their efforts, which we will also cover in the next panel. But in brief, on a regional level, Melbourne startups received over 60% of life sciences investments in all of Oceania and produced 3 exits over $50 million. The ecosystem scored in the top 10% worldwide, with particular strengths in infrastructure and talent. Stay tuned for more in our life sciences panel.
Thanks, JF. We're thrilled the Life Sciences Report is now live. A big thank you to our launch partner, LaunchVic. Now we will move on to the related life sciences panel with Mark Penzel as our moderator.
Welcome back, everyone, to today's Startup Genome event. Thank you very much for joining this session right here. We're coming together to celebrate the launch of Startup Genome's first ever life sciences edition of our annual Global Startup Ecosystem Report. Our team has been working for over a year to develop a specific methodology with which we're looking at life sciences startup ecosystems, with which we're ranking their performance and also giving specific insights into factors such as knowledge creation. And we're very happy to release that report today. And we also have today's panel and our distinguished guests in order to talk about some of the key findings and some of the trends that they're seeing in their ecosystem today. Just to mention a few points, it's quite fascinating to see that we're already counting about 108 life sciences unicorns globally. We've seen that in 2020, the total amount of Series B and plus investment has grown to over 18 billion USD, which is almost double the amount compared to 2019. And many other fascinating statistics and insights are to be found in the report. Feel free to check it out on startupgenome.com. Without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce today's guests. We have Dr. Kate Kornick, the CEO of LaunchVic, Victoria's innovation agency. We have Christoph Klöpper, the CEO of Basel Area Business and Innovation. And we have Harry Glorikian, general partner at Scientia Ventures based out of Boston. Kate, do you want to say a few words to introduce yourself?
Hi, well, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here today. As you mentioned, I'm the CEO of LaunchVic, which is the Victorian government startup agency here in Melbourne, Australia. We are an emerging ecosystem. We've been growing at quite a rapid rate over the last few years. And one of the strengths that is emerging in our ecosystem is medtech. So we're really delighted to see Melbourne featuring quite prominently in the report, and very interested in the discussion today and look forward to sharing some of the things that we've been doing in Down Under.
Perfect. Thanks so much for joining us today, Kate. Christoph, would you like to briefly introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure, absolutely. Big thank you also from my side to be able to be here on this panel. This is very, very interesting for me too. I'm heading Basel Area Business and Innovation, and we are the economic promotion agency for the Greater Basel area. That's a region in Switzerland. Actually, it's a life sciences hotspot here in Switzerland. You see behind me in the screen one of the headquarters of Novartis, one of the two companies, of the two top 5 pharmaceutical companies here in Basel. So it is really a life sciences cluster we have here, and with a growing number of startups here too. And that's, I think, why this panel is also so interesting for us.
Thank you so much, Christoph. Harry, over to you.
So, hi, I'm Harry Glorikian. Thank you so much for having me on this discussion. I'm a general partner at Scientia Ventures, and happy to participate.
Thank you so much, Harry. And Harry, perhaps you could kick us off. It was very fascinating to read your take on how technology has been transforming the life sciences industry, for example, in healthcare. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you've seen, what you're observing?
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching for quite a long time about how technology, where data and biology have been intersecting more and more over time, but technology has played a much larger role of being able to shift care or how we can get data or analyze data in different ways. And COVID-19 has just accelerated that shift. There are many things that pre-COVID I would have said, oh, that'll take about another 5 to 7 years. And now I'm looking at it going, okay, it's here, or it's happening right now. And so some startups that would have taken a lot longer have catapulted to the forefront because, take for instance, maybe just telemedicine or certain wearable technology. Physicians are saying, I need this right now. Or if I'm going to run a clinical trial, how do I get to that patient, in the wild? Because I can't stop doing what I'm doing. So we've seen a big shift, and people always ask how, will this last? And I say the durability of COVID is been so much that I think it's going to be hard for anybody to try to go back to the way that it was exactly.
Absolutely agreed. And I wonder, Kate, for example, you in Victoria, you mentioned that you see impressive trajectory in medtech, for example. Were there any specific trends you've been observing in your ecosystem or globally?
So certainly in Victoria's ecosystem, the impact of COVID was in many ways a positive thing. And I know that's a very challenging thing to say because there are a number of startups that have struggled. But the reality is the successful startups have become way more successful, way more quickly, just as Harry was saying. I think we've continued to see the rise of medtech, and that's off the back of Melbourne being a very strong research cluster. We've got great strengths around life sciences, in particular brain science, cancer research, immunology. We've got a number of very well globally renowned research institutes, and we're starting to see a trickle effect of commercialization coming from that and continued growth in the sector. At a macro level, we actually saw almost 11% jobs growth in the startup sector last year, which was quite phenomenal given what was going on in the rest of the economy. And it just shows how important startups are to our future economies. And that's something that we've been espousing for some time. I know Startup Genome's been espousing that. And I think, the COVID has just shone a light on that. And we're lucky that we've continued to grow. We've continued to see successful startups, including in medtech and biotech.
And how would you describe LaunchVic's particular role? I mean, were there any specific actions you've taken to sustain the growth and sustain the impact of the cluster in recent months?
So we've been going for 5 years, and we've been a facilitator of the ecosystem. So we've been funding programs to really drive the variety of metrics that Startup Genome measures, but particularly supporting startups to grow and making sure that they've got the networks, connections, and access to capital. I think there's a couple of things that we've done specifically in medtech. One was to really proliferate the number of programs that support medtech startups, recognizing we're a small country with 25 million people. You're not going to grow a global startup in Australia. You have to be able to understand the rest of the world. And in medtech, that necessarily means understanding regulatory regimes internationally, whether that's the US, Europe, Asia, etc. So we've put in place programs to support startups to get the access to the knowledge they need to help grow, but particularly around the regulatory regimes. The other thing which I'm happy to talk about more is what we've done with investment landscape, and particularly supporting early stage investments, so angel investments and Series A. Angel investments we've implemented during COVID, and that's been very successful. We're in the process of rolling out a fund of funds to support a proliferation of the VC sector, and particularly focused on early stage. And we're in the midst of rolling that out. So that's a watch this space, but it's a very exciting project.
Perfect, thank you. And are there any specific case studies or success stories that stood out for you in medtech, for example, coming out of the Melbourne ecosystem during the last couple of months?
I think to the companies that are doing exceptionally well and have gone incredibly quickly and grown incredibly quickly are the ones that are telehealth related, as Harry was saying. So the ones that have been here right now in market, ready to go. So we've got a company, Hot Docs, which is an online booking system, and you can book your COVID jab through Hot Docs and go off to see your physician that way. You can go see have a telepresence meeting through the system. So that's a really, a small startup that has grown prolifically through this period. But, we also have a lot of pharmaceutical companies that have continued to grow in medtech devices, and perhaps not so COVID specific, but nevertheless are getting the support they need to grow, undertake clinical trials and come to market. So the real growth has been the ones that can solve the real problems that governments are facing right now. But more broadly, we're seeing growth in almost every part of the startup sector, particularly medtech and biotech.
Yep, fantastic. Christoph, would love to hear from you. Would love to hear from Basel, which indeed is a real powerhouse in life sciences. When I read some of these statistics, it was quite fascinating. I believe life sciences represents about 1/3 of the total added value in the region. Would love to hear from you. What are some of the latest trends that you've been seeing in your ecosystem? Is there anything specific that stood out to you during the pandemic?
I mean, first of all, during the pandemic, the life sciences industry did in the end quite well. I think they did also a great job. I think in the end for us patient, bringing a vaccine to the market so quickly, I think this is a cool story. And in the end, we also see many startup stories in there, the BioNTech story, the Moderna story from Boston. I think this at least for me was cool to see that startups were in the end the agile part of the industry, but the large players could then take it up and bring a lot of value to the patient in the end, or not the patient, but the person who needed a vaccination now. And for us as a cluster, first, we really had to cope with this. There was a much higher demand for people because, Roche was doing the tests. Moderna has Lonza as its partner for production. So Lonza has its headquarters also here in Basel. So they hired a lot of people. And then I think we almost had the same problem we heard of from Harry about Boston, that it was hard to get the people into the startups if they're also the big companies offering quite good salaries. So that was probably a bit of a luxury problem for an economic region, but not for the startups, of course. And then on the startup side, I was surprised that I really feared that funding would go down. People get more risk averse. You all know Europe is probably not the most risk-taking society we have here. So we feared it could get even worse. And that was not the case, because I think people realize that there's so much value. This value can create good revenues, be it in digital medicine, but also in traditional biotechs like RNA medicines, right? We've seen them in research for such a long time, and now suddenly we see, oh, there's a lot of value in the end in the market. And then we saw that suddenly even those companies were able to raise quite large rounds of financing during the pandemic. And all the arguments we had before, oh, it needs a lot of face-to-face meetings. I need to meet the people from Boston, for instance, before I get an investment. This wasn't the case anymore. The video was enough. And I think this made life more efficient even in the startup community.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that this is also a lesson learned perhaps from the pandemic, that global collaboration can benefit at greater pace the global life sciences development. You mentioned the vaccines, for example, how we were able to bring them to market in less than a year, which was quite a fantastic achievement for the global life sciences community. Is there anything we can learn to sustain that type of global collaboration?
That's a good question, because I think life sciences was always like a global industry, right? So there was always a global collaboration. I was happy that global could also mean more efficient. So I don't have to fly to the US to have this one meeting, or to Asia, but I can do it also in a more efficient way. I think this could spur even more collaboration. I don't have to fly to Australia to profit from the great medtech ecosystem in Victoria. I could do it via video conference. I think this I think is a good news for me. And then of course, if we look at the stories, I think the BioNTech story is a great story also for the entrepreneurial life sciences ecosystem in Europe. That also cool startups and startups that bring value can grow in Europe.
Now, are there any specific areas? I mean, we all heard the war for talent, for example, and this is maybe a question to everyone, right? It's really difficult, especially for the fast-growing ecosystems, to continue to supply the talent that is needed for the successful companies, big and small. Are there any specific programs that you're leading, that you're supporting in order to continue to satisfy that demand?
I can definitely talk to that at what we're doing in Victoria. So we definitely see talent as an issue. And part of that is about encouraging people to transition. So we've done a lot of work in trying to get founders to step up, but we're not talking about the founders. We don't want too many founders in a growing company. You want the people that are going to roll their sleeves up and be happy to be in a variety of different roles. We've been focused on looking at university students, in particular in Australia. We, unlike the ecosystems that you see in Silicon Valley and Boston, where a lot of students go to the universities there because they want a job in a startup, we still have quite a conservative culture around people wanting to go and work for a large pharmaceutical versus an early stage startup. So there's a mind shift that needs to take place. So we've been doing work with that. And likewise, we've been looking at programs for later career people to transition. So whether that's because they specifically lost their job during COVID, which we saw in a lot of industries, including the airline industry, and through to people just opting out of not wanting the corporate grind anymore and wanting to do something a bit more exciting, a bit more innovative. How do you transition people to work in a startup, recognizing that while these more senior people, more experienced people might have the right skill set, they might not have the right cultural fit with the organization. And there is a learning process around getting people to transition from more traditional industries into startups to make sure they understand just the basic principles of lean methodology, what it's like to work in a scrappier organization that may not have that fully fledged HR system or fully fledged finance system, that there are going to be road bumps, and being comfortable with working with uncertainty.
Yeah. That makes sense. And Harry, for you, in one of the most advanced ecosystems in the world, have you seen that during COVID, it was more difficult to bring talent into younger, innovative firms, or was it actually an opportunity for more startup creation and for more talent to be joining startups?
Well, I mean, there's always, we're always having a little bit of ebb and flow here. There are people that say, I want to go do something new and take a few people with them, but there's always been a constraint on talent here. And even though we're, technically more advanced, relatively speaking, I think the universities and even the government can do a much better job of promoting, different educational programs and different training programs that would be even more useful. I think sometimes people think, because we have Harvard and MIT and everything else, that it's just naturally going to happen. And, if you don't put your mind to it and set up something specific, it happens, but it just doesn't happen as efficiently as you would ideally like it to happen. I get calls from young people all the time trying to understand, I'm studying this, and what does it mean? What can I do? And I shouldn't necessarily be the one to tell them that. I would hope that there would be programs in the institutions that would broaden their ability to think about what the opportunities are that they have in front of them. And so I think that if even a city like Boston had better developed programs, that we could even have more than we have today.
Absolutely. I see that we're about to run out of time, and I wonder if there are any specific statements, last points that you want to share with our audience. We have policymakers, innovation policy leaders from over 100 countries joining today, so it's an amazing opportunity to share any of the lessons learned or any of the insights that you brought to today's call. Is there anything that you would like to share, perhaps, Kate? Any last words from your side?
I think from our perspective, in a young ecosystem, it's about getting the balance right and knowing when you need to press the increase founder button, when you need to press the get more early stage capital button, and when talent is an issue. And we're starting to see talent be a permanent issue, which is I think a good thing in as much as it's a sign that we've matured. But you don't want to be encouraging too many founders to come to market if you haven't got that early stage capital really functioning efficiently. And if you've got too much early stage capital, you're going to be investing in some pretty shoddy founders, which is not going to support the sector. So it's been able to really delicately sort of fine-tune your ecosystem to grow it in the way that you want to, and hopefully we're getting the mix right here in Victoria.
Absolutely. Christoph, Harry, any other statements from your side before we wrap it up?
Maybe one thing I wanted maybe to stress is that is my experience in developing the startup ecosystem here in Basel, and I think that it's particularly in the biotech and pharmaceutical space. I think it's always good to not only look at the startup ecosystem, but in the end, you will need these big companies with you, right? They need to be, or they could be one of the investors. In many cases, they are in the end the ones who bring it to market. And I think at least in the life sciences space, I would argue that a good ecosystem is not only a startup ecosystem, but it's broader, and it also has the big companies as a crucial part of this ecosystem with them.
Absolutely agreed. Harry, any last words from your side?
Yeah, I would say that there's such an opportunity where you're seeing a combination of technology and biology that we're going to see a whole new wave of startups in those spaces, and that, having the capital to be able to support them to get off the ground, but then also to grow is going to be critical. But I would also encourage policymakers to start thinking about policy before certain things happen. It's, we've historically always made policy after something has happened. And based on what I'm seeing from a technological shift, you almost want to put policies in place before they happen so they don't run away from you. So
it's a very ambitious objective, but definitely the right mindset to be in. Thank you so much, Harry. Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you so much, Christoph. Very insightful session. I hope the audience enjoyed the session as much as I did. I just want to remind everyone that we're launching the Global Startup Ecosystem Report Life Sciences Edition today, and highly recommend you going online to startupgenome.com to check it out. Thank you so much, everyone.
Now a word from the founding chief executive of Tech Nation.
Hello, I'm Gerard Gregg, the founding chief executive of Tech Nation. Tech Nation is the UK's leading scale-up accelerator, running multiple growth programs by company stage and sector. It also runs a visa scheme for global tech talent, publishes regular insights and reports, and also runs an online academy, amongst many other things. With regards to the latest Startup Genome Report 2021, we are delighted to see Europe doing so well in terms of hitting a record high in venture capital investment. Europe's time has come, as we see many city ecosystems rise to the challenge of creating the best conditions for startups not only to be created, but to grow and scale. Turning to the UK, we are happy to hear and see that London has retained second place in the latest Global Startup Ecosystem Report rankings. We've been lucky enough at Tech Nation to see the UK tech sector grow rapidly over the last few years. The length and breadth of the UK continues to prove itself as an incredible entrepreneurial destination for tech scale-ups to grow. This summer, the UK became the third country in the world to create a 100 unicorn company. These are $1 billion valued companies, 70 of those of which are based in London. It took 24 years to create the UK's first 20 unicorns, whereas 20 unicorns were created between January and July of this year alone. That is truly an incredible statistic. No wonder the UK has seen record amount of venture capital investment in 2021. So it's great to see London scoring a perfect 10 in the funding category in Startup Genome's report this year. Some of the great success stories include car sales platform Chink, which has raised an astonishing £1 billion, digital bank Revolut, which has raised £500 million, and online events platform Hopin, which has raised nearly £300 million. Having access to talent is essential for any tech ecosystem to thrive. And in the UK, close to 3 million people now work in the sector. Our latest jobs and skills report at TechNation shows that the number of advertised tech jobs in the first half of 2021 was 42% higher than pre-pandemic levels, and the average tech salary was up to 50% higher than the average for all vacancies in the UK. That just gives you an idea of how much this sector is growing. And like any other high-performing city in the latest Global 5 top rankings, London's access to talent has been seen as a key driver for continued success. And I have to say that we are pleased to also see that the Startup Genome report awards London top marks for quality and access to talent in the technical space as well as commercial space. Talented tech workers are drawn to the international appeal of London, as you're never really very far from a tech meetup, an accelerator, or an R&D laboratory. On that note, we are pleased to see London join Berlin and Amsterdam as the top 3 cities for connectedness, and praised for their international relationships and cross-border funding and exchange of ideas. That is really the essence of startup creation and innovation. And it's great to see Europe doing so well. It's great to see London doing so well. And it's great to see the UK doing so well. It's great for the whole of the European tech sector. Thank you very much for watching.
We'll now move on to the European strategies to become a global top 20 ecosystem panel with Stefan Kuster as our moderator.
Good morning. It's a great pleasure. I'm joined this morning for our discussion of the Global Startup Ecosystem Report 2021 on our European panel, where we are seeking to discuss the situation of Europe and key trends that are happening across the European ecosystem. So I'm delighted to be joined today by Maya Gur, joining us from Tel Aviv, Shell Hakan Nerfeld, Chief Strategy Officer of Vinnova, that's the National Innovation Agency of Sweden, and obviously Prince Constantine von Oranje, joining us from Amsterdam and representing the Dutch ecosystem, and obviously leading organization TechLeap. Without further ado, I think I would like to invite you to first of all introduce yourself very briefly. Maya, if you would give it a start.
Good morning. I'm Maya from Tel Aviv Global, a municipality company under the mayor's office, in charge in facilitating and promoting the global quantum leap taken by the city, by the ecosystem here, in the global outreach. So happy to be here.
Great to have you, Maya. Thank you so much. And Shell, if you would briefly introduce yourself.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Kjell Nerfeld from Vinnova, the Swedish innovation agency in Sweden. Vinnova is an agency that is working with developing the Swedish innovation ecosystem and also supporting anything that stimulates and develops innovation in Sweden. And I'm very glad to be here on the panel, and thank you for inviting me.
And Shell, it will be interesting to hear, and let us dive into that for a minute or so later during our discussion, as you are developing what I understand is almost a hub and spoke model, capitalizing on the strengths of Stockholm, but also working towards a more regional ecosystem. So something in a sense where Sweden is probably setting an example for other parts of Europe that are seeing similar opportunities. Konstantin, if I may ask you to introduce yourself as well.
Yes, my name is Constantine. I'm the envoy for TechLeap. It's an organization that basically is connecting all the dots in the Dutch ecosystem, but also connecting internationally we're more and more focusing on really building the community. So from interventions that are more at systemic level now, working much more with founders to understand what they need and what they need to connect and grow from the Netherlands.
Thank you so much, Konstantin, for introducing yourself. And it's not a secret. What we've seen, particularly in Amsterdam, has been a meteoric rise, I would say. Very keen to hear what you've done to make that happen. It's not easy in the Startup Genome Global rankings. It's easier to show growth. It is very, very difficult to jump into rankings as all leading ecosystems show a significant growth. Amsterdam has managed to do that on a very consistent basis. Hugely impressive.
You keep adding ecosystems, so it's difficult. New ones add, so the group grows as well. So even to stay at one level is quite a challenge. But
that's right. You guys really have shown how to do it. So really, really interested to see what you've done and how that has happened. Allow me to very briefly set the scene a little bit with a few data points. Us being Startup Genome, you would expect a few data points to the beginning of any discussion. First of all, we've been working towards democratizing access to startup ecosystems. That's a very big word to make, but our intention as a company, as a team, as a members network always has been to bring as much knowledge as possible to as many ecosystems as possible for more people to participate in the unique value creation that we are seeing in startup ecosystems, in innovation ecosystems. And this year's report is evidence of that trend to be happening globally and certainly happening in Europe. So more and more cities, regions, clusters jumping on the startup ecosystem, the innovation bandwagon for good reasons, as many governments obviously are seeking to find the next economic impulse that can help us fight off recessionary tendencies coming out of the pandemic. So it's great news in that sense. When we look at Europe, we see many more cities joining us. Just to spell out a few key findings, Europe takes the top 5 spots globally: London, Berlin, Amsterdam, Delta. When it comes to global connectedness with other ecosystems in the world, that's so important to build scaling companies in a successful scaling segment. We saw the number of unicorns triple in 2020 in the year of the pandemic from 3 to 9. Again, that's just evidence of what is happening in Europe. And the ecosystem value on average reaches in 2020 $6.3 billion. That's the highest after North America, and that's really something to note. Really an important number to look at. Top 5 performers, the top spot in Europe, there's no surprise, it's London, followed by Paris, and number 3 already, Amsterdam, Delta, followed very closely by Stockholm on number 4 and Berlin, Germany in number 5. Probably even more interesting to note the top regional challengers, those ecosystems I was speaking about that are coming through and they're building more and more and accelerating their development. And that's Copenhagen leading the pack, followed by Barcelona, Estonia with a dramatic rise, Madrid, and Zurich, Switzerland. So that's where we are in Europe in the 2020 rankings. And I would like to open up our discussion now. We've been talking about the global startup revolution for the last 10 years, as I mentioned, at Genome and within our members network. And that certainly came through in 2020 and is ongoing in 2021. So many more spots being added to the list of innovation clusters in the knowledge economy. When you look back over the last 12, 18 months, what are the 1 or 2 really exciting things, probably also scary things as we developed through the pandemic and its impact that you had to deal with that happened in your ecosystems? And maybe Konstantin, if you want to give it a first go.
Yeah, well, unavoidably COVID. So I think what we're proud of is we very rapidly mounted a loan scheme for bridging finance for companies, and we've seen that very few of our startups have actually failed because of the COVID crisis. Even in travel and events, it's been very hard, but they've grown, and now the funding rounds are incredibly substantial, more substantial than before. We've now gone from 1.7 billion last year to already up to 7 billion this year in venture capital. And it's growing, so it's really quite meteoric, as you said. I think we're very happy that after years and years and years of pushing and pulling, we've had now a better options, share options, at least ruling that it's not where we wanted to be yet in terms of percentage of tax, but at least in when you pay. So that's good. So, and there have been, and we've have considerably more funding for deep tech as well, a few $100 million also from the government, and we don't propagate a lot of public money for these things. Usually, we prefer to actually source in or crowd in private money, but as a first step, as a primer for a very hard market to enter, especially in the early stage investments, it is very good to have a few $100 million extra for deep tech. So some really positive developments, and actually on all indicators. Also look at exits, look at rounds raised. Things are looking really well.
That's great. Thank you, Konstantin, for giving us the perspective from the Netherlands. When I look at deep tech, and in our report and our statistics, we can clearly see that deep tech, in a very broad sense, is still, if the wording is okay, a winner of the pandemic, as these companies really have been put into the spotlight when it comes to blockchain, supply chain management, when it comes to life sciences and health tech. Do you think we are in Europe already where we ought to be in order to help these companies incubate, accelerate, to fund them properly? You need a lot of patient capital. Typically, these things are coming out of research labs that take years and years in development. I sometimes have my question mark, are we getting that right in Europe as of now? Yes, please, if I may.
No, I think we're not even there, not even starting there. I think there's far too much public money still. There's far too little venture capital in the sector. I think if there's one area where Europe has a really defendable space, that it's deep tech. Is we got the science, we got the talent, that's all there, but it's really how to scale these companies into global companies where we need capital, and we need domestic capital for that as well. I think there's been a lot of foreign capital coming in. Some of that is very strategic. Not all of that is very helpful. I think in the long run to retain also IP in Europe and grow those companies. So I think it's an area that requires a lot of attention. And we'll be also focusing much more of it because there are very structural difficulties to get these kind of companies to scale. And but capital is really important, and talent, obviously. Another thing that really concerns us is diversity in the tech sector, and not only diversity in terms of gender, but also in how do we ensure that this sector that's growing so fast, that's employing so many people, that we actually get that to benefit much wider groups in society, and also that we remain very attractive for foreign talent also to come to work in the companies that are based here.
I would probably agree, if I can, because one of the areas that we are focusing quite a lot now is just deep tech, and we had made some short surveys on the situation here in Sweden for deep tech, and I would say also talent and capital supply is something that we have to look into more deeply in order to be able to really pick up the value that is in all those kind of research and technology that we are investing in. But I don't think it's not only capital, it's really also skill development within the companies, because what we see, at least here in Sweden, is that you might need like 15-20 million Swedish kronor to reach product market fit. And that's not usual for venture capitalists to do it in so early stages with those kind of money. And also looking at how do you really design a capital supply process for the companies. I've seen many companies coming out of the university after the first very seed rounds. They have already been diluted and sold out like 40 to 50% of their ownership. So they have become employees before they are really starting their journey. So the financial engineering skills of the companies is also something that has to be developed for, and also the networking to connect them very well internationally in order to be able to exploit their potential value creation. So there's a lot of things. That's a very systemic kind of approach that you have to take into deep tech, and it's one of the sectors where we really focus now and look into how we can help develop the Swedish deep tech sector.
Thank you, Shell, for giving us that insight, and obviously we can see it a lot. I mean, these are companies coming through in deep tech from a technical perspective, an engineering perspective, a physics or a doctor's perspective, and then to look at the scaling skills to really build a company. That's probably a shortage that we are going to grapple with in Europe for the foreseeable future. And as ecosystem facilitators, we ought to make extra efforts to make sure we get these experienced people available in deep tech. Maya, brief look at Tel Aviv, the 1-2 things remarkable in the development over the last 12, 18 months that you would like to highlight.
Sure, of course. Well, actually, I agree with what my colleague said. I think our ecosystem are kind of similar as well. Both of them are, the three of them are kind of small, modest size. And so the challenges are really similar. But for us in the last year and a half, even more, we've seen a tremendous growth and a new level of maturity of the ecosystem. Honestly, the COVID was the worst pandemic that we had recently, but for the ecosystem, I mean, it broke records in everything, in every aspect. The two main things that I would love to celebrate with you is as I said, the growth. We see more and more emergence of unicorns, even decathorns. So we are very excited about that. If in the past startups used to just grow a little and immediately sell to the US to a bigger company for $1 million or up to $1 million, today they decide to continue to grow themselves. And that brings to the new level of maturity. We not only have new companies growing and not selling, they actually decide to grow, stay here and grow in the city. And that's also an amazing thing for the ecosystem because it provides, I mean, for the residents, the city, having such an industry flourishing here and its presence allows jobs and you know, all the things around it, all the small and local businesses that profit from it. So those are two of the things that we see and we want to continue and promote their presence here.
That's great to hear. And when we look at our data, every job created in a startup leads to, on average, a factor of 4x in additional job creation. So the economic and the job creation effects, particularly of a scale-up segment, are obviously very, very substantial. I would like to run through the three of you really quick fire. What's the one initiative you would love to share with fellow European and other startup ecosystems that you're working on at the moment? And maybe Constantine, if I may start with you again.
Well, yeah, we decided to also do a very thematic approaches. But quite deep. So we're now focusing on health tech, and we've gone really into which segment gets which investments, staffing, all kinds of aspects of the health tech sector, because we found that though it was the biggest sector in terms of deals and also volume of venture capital in 2020, most of companies don't scale. So it's only 29% companies that go from startups to scale-ups. And that doesn't mean that they actually then scale really into really big companies. So we really wanted to understand why that was and what's holding them back. And so we did a really deep dive into that. Actually, we're presenting it this week, and we're going to also follow through with programs to support health tech companies, especially through peer-to-peer connections and introducing them to more experienced entrepreneurs. Because what we found is that they're very science driven, and they don't typically focus too much on the market side and the actually, as you said, the growth mindset and growing the company, and also the financial engineering. So they dilute too soon, and they don't have a lot of choice in investors. So the local investor base is pretty narrow, and the ticket sizes are relatively small. So they become very dependent on their investors. And a lot of public investors as well. And there's the connection between the public investors and the private investors is pretty poor. And so when they really need that kind of extra investment, they stall. So for us, it's very exciting because you get really close on what the real issues are, and we can actually straddle a bit between the issues that entrepreneurs have and our reach into the public sector and other key stakeholders that we can now mobilize to improve the situation.
So really highly focused cluster strategy, and I believe that's something where others in Europe actually can leverage what you're doing, really putting focus on a number of sectors or clusters, and really having a comprehensive strategy around developing those. Maya, when you look at Tel Aviv, the one thing you're working on that you would like to share?
As I say, we have amazing talent, but it's not enough. We need more. And so one of the things we're working on is creating programs that connect all the players together, the one that do the training, skilling, the industry, the residents, and we want to answer that demand of talent through training of residents here. So assisting the industry with it.
So focus on homegrown talent rather than attracting from abroad.
I think, yeah, that's something that we're going to do now. We're still working always with the university on attracting talent from abroad, but still developing inside. It's our main focus, together with helping the scale-up companies to scale and have their presence in the city. So those two together really combine and give a holistic solution for it.
Yeah, thank you, Maya. And talent shortages, I've been in the industry for the last decade. That's not new, even in the largest of all ecosystems, the Tel Avivs, the Londons, the Amsterdams, the Stockholms. I think that's something that's plaguing all of us. It will be interesting to see what can we do in the universities, what can we also do with older and more diverse talent. I think Konstantin made a point before. What can we do to activate other elements of population to really participate? Shell, few words on what are you looking at Vinova this year? What's the one thing to share?
I don't think of the one, but I can quickly make a few comments. One is sustainability. We have quite a lot of focus in sustainability, and not only addressing sustainability goals, but really making sustainability integrated in the business, making it a competitive advantage. And we have recently introduced something called sustainability readiness levels to measure the matureness of startups in their work with sustainability. We also look into this kind of, as Maya, on the coordination and integration of players, and especially also getting the corporates involved in the startup ecosystem. One thing that we're quite proud of is Ignite, which is something that we have funded that helps corporates to work together with startups in order to boost the startups business. But we are all from a national point looking how could we coordinate and integrate players and resources so Sweden becomes more rounder. So it's not only Stockholm, but regardless of where you are in Sweden, you can get the best help you can in order to be able to grow. And of course, as Maya pointed also, we have to get out of the exit trap. Sweden is doing too much exit too early. So having scalers grow with Sweden as a base, of course, is a policy goal we have.
Again, Chair, thank you for sharing that. I think the scale gap is something that's endemic in most places in Europe. We ought to work more on making sure that our companies have the runway, the financial runway, the talent runway, the very distinct support to scale. I know that a number of countries are really proactively working on it, not the least the Netherlands with a distinct program driving it, others as well. So hopefully we will see a bit more of scaling success on a broader scale all across Europe. Also, thank you for mentioning the sustainability discussion. We are very concerned about, first of all, sustainability goals, sustainable investment. What do we really consider as to be sustainable capital going into the ecosystem? And last but not least, obviously, the entire debate around climate change and how tech can help. And again, we are not seeing the scaling companies as yet that really could make a dent in helping the world overcome the climate crisis. And that's something I believe we all jointly, particularly as Europeans, ought to work on. We are almost out of time. Maya, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Konstantin, it's a great pleasure to get your perspective on what's happening in the north of Europe, and Shell, obviously, to share what you're doing, particularly in regards to sustainability, deep tech, and also the hub and spoke, so really spreading the knowledge beyond the big cluster. Big thank you from Startup Genome and our network, and we will see you again very soon. Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to introduce you to the Minister from the Ministry of Economic Affairs, Innovation, Digitization, and Energy of the state of the North Rhine-Westphalia, Germany.
A virtual hello to the online audience. Startups are absolutely crucial to North Rhine-Westphalia because they take up technological advances early on. In doing so, they contribute to the transformation of the whole economy. With their innovative ideas and business models, they are important cooperation partners. In terms of economic strength, North Rhine-Westphalia, and specifically the Rhine-Ruhr metropolitan region, has the strategic advantage of being one of Europe's most closely set science regions, with major international corporations, world-leading SMEs, and research institutions. So, with more than 11 million residents and a student population of 500,000, it is an outstanding environment for the development of competitive future technologies. Our young, fast-growing startup ecosystem is extremely active and well-connected, even in times of the coronavirus pandemic. One only needs to look at the startup tempo and the focal areas of industry activity to recognize the potential for development going forward. Still, we are keen to increase the international appeal of these innovative startups even further and make our state one of the top 10 startup regions in Europe by 2025. We want North Rhine-Westphalia's business founders to realize their national and international potential. Now is the time for them to reach the next level in terms of revenue, employment, and investment. So, to support these successful and scalable startups, we have this month launched Germany's first Scale-Up program, demonstrating our aim to scale first-rate North Rhine-Westphalian-based startups and attract investors and business angels from all over the world. Successful scale-ups lead to an increase in startups, VC funding, and visibility. This will in turn serve to make the whole ecosystem even more attractive. There are many ways for digital innovations to potentially lead to new markets. Ultimately, it is open innovation that brings the change. Experts from different fields come together, join forces, and work out new solutions. On that note, I encourage you to enjoy and draw inspiration from this event with its regional perspectives and numerous impulses for trends and global innovations.
Now we move on to the State of the African Startup Ecosystem panel with GEN's Jonathan Orthmans as our moderator.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Orthmans, and I'm president of the Global Entrepreneurship Network, and very proud to be helping facilitate this discussion today in the wake of the launch of our Global Startup Ecosystem Report. The team at Startup Genome have done a tremendous job over the years in helping us to dig deep and understand the data and trends that are driving the entrepreneurial ecosystems that are so important to our entrepreneurs as they look to innovate, take risks, dream, build things, and effectively improve the lives of their fellow citizens. At the Global Entrepreneurship Network, we have that as our true north. What is it that we can do to make it easier for people everywhere to start or scale a firm, to create jobs, to improve people's lives, and obviously in the overall to rebuild their economies? And I'm starting to use that word rebuild because we're now in the post-pandemic environment. And as I have said earlier during this pandemic, I was shocked at the fact that this pandemic was tailor-made for a global response, but it never got one. In fact, in many countries, it never even got a state response, let alone a national one or even a local one. It got millions and millions of different responses. And in this instance, as we look to regenerate our economies coming out of this difficult time for the world, we hope that we can do it together. We hope that we can look at our borders as being porous to innovation like they were to the virus. And we hope that as we look to rebuild for a better global economy and for a better future for all of us, that we can do this in a collaborative and cooperative way. And so therefore, looking at the Global Startup Ecosystem Report and the work that Startup Genome and organizations like Gen Global do is very important. We take a global view of these things And it's very important that we do this collectively. Well, one of the most important continents that we're going to be focusing on today is Africa. And I'm very pleased to invite my colleagues joining me in this discussion to introduce themselves. So first of all, Lance, you're in Cape Town. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm Lance Kraling. I'm the Director for Enterprise and Investment at the City of Cape Town, and our department funds a number of special purpose vehicles, which I'll tell you a bit more about during the panel discussion. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lance. And Bill, you're joining us from the IFC. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jonathan. Bill Sonneborn, I'm the Senior Director for Disruptive Technologies and Funds at the International Finance Corporation, part of the World Bank Group, and lead a portfolio of around $7 billion funding and developing entrepreneurship networks in emerging markets globally.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us, Bill, today. And then last but not least, Gamu. And Gamu, as I get you to introduce yourself, I'm going to put on my Gen Africa hat, because I was given this hat by your president actually at our 22 on Sloan campus in Johannesburg. So I will invite you to introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jonathan, and delighted to see that you still have your cap. My name is Gamuchirai Mutezo, and I'm the Chief Operations Officer at 22 on Sloan, which is Africa's largest startup campus. In a nutshell, we do all things program related as well as ecosystem development. Last but not least, the working environment, co-working for small and medium-sized enterprises.
Great. Well, thank you, Gamu. Well, first of all, I want to kick off this discussion. You know, many of us are deeply passionate about Africa. I have been for my whole life. My mother was actually born in Africa. We spend a lot of time, but I think in the entrepreneurship world, we've all viewed Africa as being a place of great opportunity and promise for those of us that are enablers of entrepreneurs, not the entrepreneurs themselves, but the enablers. We want to help more Africans be successful. So I want to kick it off first, if I can, to turn to you as far as the IFC is concerned. I mean, you guys have been working in developing economies, building entrepreneurial ecosystems for some time now. Tell us a little bit more about what you're up to in Africa. But in particular, we're very focused on, you know, are there any solutions that you've been testing or interventions you've been testing that are working? And give us perhaps an example of something that's not working. So go ahead. We'd like to hear a little bit more about what you're up to.
Sure. Thanks, Jonathan. And you're exactly right. Our focus is really thinking about how entrepreneurship can help lift people out of poverty and create shared prosperity and really solve the jobs agenda, which is an important agenda given the youthful population on the continent of Africa. And you see some really robust things happening in places like Kenya and Nigeria and South Africa. We have Lance here to represent that, in Egypt in the north, but it's not shared across all 54 countries. And so our focus is continuing to have the prosperity of entrepreneurship continue and grow and access to capital in those markets that have a robust ecosystem. But it's also to start building it in those countries and markets that don't have one. So a great example is just the work we've done between digital infrastructure, thinking about entrepreneurship in a country like Ethiopia, one of the largest populations. We first tested, you know, kind of the spirit of entrepreneurship by putting 350 young women through Gabea, which is actually a coding school in Ethiopia with mentorship. And really the test was going through that coding school, how many of those young women were going to go work for Ethiopia Airways in their technology department? And how many of them decided they wanted to become CEO of their new business? And what was magnificent is how many of those young women decided they wanted to start up their own business. Now, the challenge in Ethiopia is there's no data access. So we need to work with our colleagues at the World Bank, as well as our public-private partnership colleagues, to advise the Ethiopia government to modernize and open up and create competition in the mobile network space to increase access to data. And so that is now happening, right? We're now having the country offer 2 different licenses to compete with the state-owned mobile operator. Then we partnered with startup Genome to say, what are the regulatory inhibitors that are preventing more entrepreneurs from setting up business in the country? And it's the way the government set up, the number of agencies an entrepreneur has to deal with to actually set up and get a license to operate takes forever. So now we're working with our colleagues at the World Bank and our Creating Markets Advisory to change all those regulations to create a startup act in the country. So if we can create the right regulatory environment now, once that's in place, we're now working on funding accelerators in Ethiopia and seed funds to start to really give access to capital and then bring in diaspora networks to help fund what we hope will be a very exciting opportunity for venture investors for decades to come. That's kind of the success story. Failures, there's many, right? We've been trying to figure out Somalia, for example, and we simply can't. And so regardless of what we're doing from a capacity building perspective, it's just really impossible for us to come up with a solution at this point in time. Hope that helps. Back to you.
Thank you for that. You know, and I think at Gen we've also been in the same way. We've had more success in some of the little bit more developed economies. In fact, we're building our second campus in Africa, in Cairo. But I think that there are a lot of innovative ways that we can be working in some of the really struggling economies, particularly on seeding things for the long term, while some people are working out more political stability on the geopolitical level. In terms of culture, and this is one of the things that I've seen a lot of organizations doing, which is to bring in, as you say, some of the not just the accelerators, but some of the startup community programs that build the mindset, the entrepreneurial mindset, which is a long-term play to be able to do. But let's move, if we can, down to Cape Town. Take a word. Obviously, Cape Town has had a reputation of being a kind of startup capital in many respects. I know we've held events in Cape Town and really enjoyed hearing some of the great success stories. But tell me a little bit more about what you're up to enable that, and what you've been working at that may be working, and indeed if there's anything you want to share that's not working. Something us entrepreneurs are very good at doing, which is looking at all things we do as experiments where we collect data and work out what works and what doesn't. So. But love to hear from you, Lance. Welcome, and love to hear what you've got to say about what's happening in Cape Town from your government perspective.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks. And as you say, we've got a very vibrant tech startup ecosystem here in Cape Town. In fact, we've got 60% of the startups in South Africa actually are based in Cape Town. And we see ourselves as the kind of tech startup capital of Africa, in fact. So that really is something that we're proud of. And we think that we've got a really good ecosystem here that enables this to happen. And I think if I can just elaborate a bit on how we built up that ecosystem. So as is the city of Cape Town, I mean, we run some of our own programs, but also importantly, we see ourselves not as being the experts in particular high growth sectors. So what we do is we fund various sector development agencies, such as the Cape IT Initiative, Green Cape, which looks at the green economy and SMEs in that space, Cape BPO, which looks at call centers. So we fund a range of them in different sectors, and then they become the sector experts and they work with industry to make sure that they can put in place the right kind of programs, particularly when it comes to funding, making sure people are able to access those funding as easily as possible, as well as skills pipelines. And in fact, that's been some of our key successes over this last 2 years, have been some of the big skills programs that we've in fact run for some of the high growth sectors. So that will certainly help sustain the future of those startups and some of those big companies as well, to make sure that we can remain this kind of vibrant ecosystem for startups in Cape Town.
Great. So as you look at this, and I'll invite others to comment on this shortly, but you know, is there something that you've particularly looked at the impact of it and said, I don't think this is really something that's the right intervention, or something in particular that you want to stress? Because you know you can fund those industry vertical specific streams. But is there something that you would do differently, or something that you would do again in particular in terms of a specific intervention?
Well, I think let me talk about the skills programs that we ran in the tech sector particularly. So we've run a very successful skills program in the BPO sector, which is essentially the call centers. And we're training up about 3,000 people through the National Skills Fund. And that comes with the proviso that the company is will in fact guarantee to take those learners on board. And that's worked really well. Unfortunately, in the tech sector, what we found is that even though people talk about a skills deficit, some of the initial programs we ran, we found that we were struggling to place those graduates into companies. And so what we had to do was go back to the drawing board and really kind of dig deep and make a proper analysis with the companies to understand what are your specific needs that you require, and also what are some of the things that they need to compromise on, because we always found that we can train them up, but they look for people with 5 years experience in order to take those positions. So now we've had to look at learnerships, and we've had to look at a whole new model in that space to make sure we've got the skills pipelines. So I think that's been a great learning for us.
Well, that's great. So Gamu, let's hear a little bit. You're not far away from Cape Town. You're in Johannesburg, but I know that 22 on Sloan, led by Kazito, has been very much the executive leadership of Gen Africa. So feel free to comment outside of 22 on Sloan too. But do you want to give us your perspective on what's working and what's not working in supporting entrepreneurs?
Right. I'll start off by providing a bit of context in terms of what we went through, not just as 22 on Sloan, but the Johannesburg ecosystem and some parts of our sister organizations across the continent. 2020 showed us a lot of opportunities and challenges that the continent presents. In May of 2020, we hosted the Ideation Challenge, where we identified entrepreneurial ideas, not just from the South African ecosystem, but counterparts in the East, as well as Western parts of the region. And it was really fascinating to note that amid all this madness, there are some really innovative ideas that are targeting challenges on the ground. The issues that they were now facing is we've got the ideas, but where do we go? Who do we speak to know the next steps thereafter? And this is where the Gen Africa Network played an important role. Some won a prize or two, others won networks. And by won networks, we're able to link them up with counterparts in Tanzania, Uganda, Nigeria, as well as Senegal and a few other African countries. It also presented an opportunity for us to start considering the possibility of having a virtual accelerator, whether this is going to happen now or later, but it is one of those key elements that we are keeping at the back of the mind. Fast forward into the latter part of 2022, because we have co-working space, right, for the two pillars of services that we offer in terms of the incubation and acceleration. The idea for co-working space is such that the emerging early stage businesses have an ecosystem in which they can thrive while focusing on achieving the deliverables from either programs. But we noted that they were really heavily struck, especially from a financial perspective. Hence, the co-working space became quieter and quieter. And Jonathan, you know, from the day we launched, it's always been a beehive of activity, conversation, and the whole nine yards. But we're starting to see the resilience of small businesses because they really want it. And that resilience, feet are coming back into Sloan. Feet are coming back into the spaces where conversations are had and bums on seats in terms of participating in the programs. So that experience in itself also had us thinking along the lines of a 22 on Sloan Capital, looking to set aside some small packages for early stage entrepreneurs, the seed element. It's one thing to say, I want a burger. Do you always know where the burgers come from? There's so many things that happen, which is now the early stage component that equally need some seed funding into it. So that's the second thing we have going on at this stage, exploring a 22 on Sloan capital model. And lastly, repurposing the space in such a way that we have a very healthy and dynamic environment, not just of small businesses, but corporate, as well as our ecosystem partners. As Sloan, our speciality might be A until D, but within the ecosystem, you've got other partners who are bringing E to F, Z to Y, and the whole nine yards. So those are the three opportunities that we are exploring based on the challenges that we had encountered as Sloan and as Gen Africa.
That's great. Thank you for that, Gamu. And I know that you've built the 22 on Sloan Village, as you say, to include not just startups and investors, but corporate venture, and academics, and all of the other ecosystem leader support components. And it's really it's something to be applauded. I remember when I was there with Richard Branson and we opened 22 on Sloan, there was the governor of the province, Gauteng province there, and he said, I don't understand, where's our plaque and where are all the governments acknowledged on the wall? And I was able to turn in front of a member of the media and say, well, actually, this was put together through private sector risk-taking ingenuity of entrepreneurs in Africa. It was not done through just a big government grant. And it's good to see, though, that you've got the support of Cyril Ramaphosa, your president, and I know you've got ministers coming there next week, I believe, or at least there's going to be a panel with ministers. So congratulations to you on that. I think it's the right approach to be able to take. But let's if we can, I want to ask you all a kind of big picture question here about Africa. And one of the great things that the Global Startup Ecosystem Report does, but I think the work overall by Startup Genome is to help us really get under the hood, as we say, to really understand, hence my question for you about what's working and what's not working, to really understand what interventions are being effective in terms of, advancing growth entrepreneurship. And I think we have so much to learn, but I want to ask you all, do you think Africa's learning enough and benefiting enough from these experiments that things like the Global Startup Ecosystem Report are shedding on successes around the world? There's a lot of innovation agencies, there's a lot of government institutions, but there's also a lot of private sector institutions that are really being very effective and in collecting data, understanding their input, and adjusting the sales accordingly. I've always wondered, we're very focused on the African continent. Do we think that Africa is capitalizing enough on some of the learnings from these experiments in other developing markets around the world? Anybody can comment. I'll maybe start with you, Bill.
I think when I speak to ministers across Africa, government officials, and my colleagues at the World Bank do all the time as well, there is a desperate interest in how to build more robust ecosystems, which has really come about, I think, even greater post-COVID as a result of the need for, digital services. You also have governments now in Africa moving quite swiftly to digital IDs, which are kind of like a precursor, a building block for foundation that you've seen work in Estonia and Israel and other markets to help accelerate entrepreneurship. So I think the kindling is on the fire. A little bit of capital and a little bit of change of regulation and a little bit more support from governments, the blaze could start.
Great. Well, let's go. Final comment from the other two.
Yeah, just to say, I would agree with Bill. I think it is about regulatory reform, and I think it is also about providing the capital, making sure the capital is able to get to those businesses that require it. And if I can give one quick example, which has been initiated here, is the Green Outcomes Fund, where we've been able to blend concessionary finance with local fund managers finance. So we've managed to get 92 million Rand of concessionary finance, and that's unlocked a further 400 million Rand of finance from loan fund managers. So that's worked really, really well, and that's come with the green impact. And so we've definitely looked at how we can make a difference in that space. So I think there are certainly some examples to show.
That's great, Lance. And Gamu, we'll have a final word from you. Are you optimistic? You feel like
to complement what the two gentlemen have said, absolutely yes. Although there's a lot of room for improvement where information sharing and dissemination is concerned, you'll find that there are a lot of activities on the ground. It's just that there aren't any platforms that entrepreneurs may be aware of or ecosystem role players may be aware of to showcase the work that is actually happening. So there is a bit of work for us to complement the top to bottom, bottom to top approach in terms of just putting the information out there for Tom, Dick, and Harry to know the next steps.
Thank you, Gamu. Well, thank you, Bill, Lance, Gamu. Thank you for joining us today. This is our short conversation, the Kickstarter. I hope if you've not taken a look at it, you'll look at the Global Startup Ecosystem Report that's just being released by Startup Genome and Gen. And we're very proud that this continues to share information across borders as we all look to smooth the path for entrepreneurs in the future. So thank you all very much indeed. And I think we'll all get back to work on making this work in Africa. Thank you.
Now we move on to the State of the Latin America Startup Ecosystem panel with Mark Penzel as our moderator.
Welcome back, everyone, to today's Startup Genome event. We're jumping into our next session, which I'm personally super excited about. We're here to discuss the state of the Latin American startup ecosystem, and I have three experts from three different ecosystems to be discussing the latest trends with me. As I prepared for this panel, the progress that I read about for your ecosystem has been quite encouraging. Regardless of the metrics, I was looking at startup creation, VC capital invested, growth of scale-ups, growth of unicorns. A lot has happened during the last couple of months and years. And yeah, I'm very, very happy to unpack some of the latest trends together with you. Felipe, do you want to say a few words about yourself and your role in the ecosystem?
Well, sure. And first of all, thanks for having me. It's really good to be here and to discuss some of the advancements of the Brazilian and Latin American startup ecosystems. I'm the president of AB Startups, which stands for the Brazilian Association of Startups. It's the largest entity in the region that congregates startups. We are more than 7,000 associated startups all from Brazil. And I've been myself working with the Brazilian ecosystem for the past 23 years.
Rocio, over to you. Do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
I'm Rocio Fonseca. As Mark said, I'm the CIO of Corfo, is the Chilean Innovation Development Agency. And what we are doing basically for the last 10 years, we have been providing grants to promote innovation, entrepreneurship in our country, plus to promote and create the venture capital industry. So if you say that what is grant plus venture capital is around $1.5 billion for the last 10 years. So that's our main goal. We depend from the government. We're a public organization, and the main goal is always to boost innovation, to create an entrepreneurial mindset, and to change basically and to diversify the economic matrix. So that's the reason why we are here.
Perfect. Good to have you, Rocio. And over to you, Francisco.
Sure. So I'm Francisco Noguera. I'm president of Impulsa Colombia. We're also a government agency in charge of promoting the entrepreneurship and innovation agenda in Colombia. We work in three basic levels. One, providing direct services to startups in various stages of maturity, incubation, acceleration, and also connection to scaling mechanisms. We also work to promote new financing vehicles and mechanisms for startups and entrepreneurship in Colombia. Thirdly, we work to strengthen the ecosystem, connecting regions, connecting regional and sectoral ecosystem hubs to promote better connectedness in terms of the national and regional ecosystems of Colombia. And lastly, we work to promote a policy framework that makes Colombia a friendly ground for entrepreneurs and innovators, and to establish the country as a regional hub for innovation and entrepreneurship.
Thank you very much, Francisco. And perhaps before we jump into the specific trends in your ecosystems, I think it would be good to do a very brief recap on what has happened in LATAM across the region. We have a few articles in the global report that we just launched, and it's been, as I said, very encouraging to see the overall trends in terms of all of what is happening in the ecosystem. What is your perspective? What is your perception on how the ecosystem grew as a region over the last couple of years? What are you seeing? Perhaps I'll start with you, Rocio.
Yeah, well, I see that we are growing. I think when we started, all the countries in Latin America, maybe they started in less than 10 years to worry about innovation and entrepreneurship, right? And when you see the startups that are going out, and you can see the unicorns that are flourishing, and you can see how the businesses are growing, I think for us it's great, because our economic development depends basically on natural resources, right? So it's basically a very extractive way to do businesses with high social and economical, social and environmental impact. And with startups, you can change that. You can diversify the matrix and you can add value. And I think that's one of the main focus that we have in common, that to promote the entrepreneurial ecosystem and innovation can help you to split the matrix and to help our countries grow.
And what have you seen in Chile specifically during the last couple of months in the context of the pandemic, for example? How did the ecosystem evolve?
Well, I think it's awesome because during the first semester, we had 2 unicorns. We didn't have any, so we're super, super happy with that. That's the first one. But I will say that for us in Chile, almost all the successful startups, they have B2B business models, and they are very focused on solving real problems, real issues, right? It's not just getting your evaluation higher. It's about how can you create a better impact with the business that you are doing. So I truly believe that the pandemic, the COVID-19 help us to make those business grow even, I don't know, higher than the things that we were thinking. So we are very happy, but we have the lack of venture capital here is the main gap. So we're trying to change that too.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about what Corfo and Startup Chile is up to these days. You know, as you know, the programs that you've developed have become, you know, very popular and a very remarkable success. What are some of the things that Corfo is working on right now to really sustain the growth and the impact of the startup ecosystem?
Well, so as I told you, basically, we're always promoting the Chilean economic development, right? So today, and everything that is going on related on climate change, on COVID-19, it helps you to redesign or rethink the way that we do businesses, right? So everything that we're doing in Corfo, it has to be with that change too, right? Startup Chile, innovation department, entrepreneurial department is, okay, it's good to do businesses, it's amazing to have economical development, but plus that, you have to be careful with your environment and with the society, right? So how the business are changing, that's the main goal. And of course, the other goal is to reduce the gap gender. That for us is today the focus is gap gender and sustainable development.
Perfect, thank you so much. Felipe, let's turn to Brazil for a second. Last time I was there, I was quite impressed with all of what's been going on. We talked a lot about the Startup Act. I know this was a very important milestone for you. What changed during the last couple of months during the pandemic? What are some of the latest trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, well, there's a lot going on, and just to start with your point, the Startup Act was approved and is now like it taken term already. It's in action.
Congratulations!
It was super important that you have a legal framework that frames specifically startups, investors, and all the players of the ecosystem, and we now have also some incentives. I mean, it could always have been better. There are many things that are still fighting to keep improving, but overall, it was really important to have this type of legal recognition for startups, especially in Brazil, where there's a lot of uncertainties in terms of how legislation address many aspects of entrepreneurship. But for startups here, I would say we're living the best times ever. The investments have skyrocketed. We reached in the first semester of 2021, we reached more investments than actually the whole year of 2020, which was already very good in comparison with 2019. So the investment curve is accelerating. So only in the first semester of 2021, we had more than $6 billion in venture capital investments deployed in Brazil, which is quite remarkable. And this is also turning into a new wave of unicorns coming in. So we went from 0 to 20 plus unicorns in less than 3 years. and the majority of them were born this year in 2021. So, and it's getting faster and faster. Another trend that is particularly new in the past few months or year is the local IPOs of tech companies. So we never had the local IPOs of tech companies in Brazil before. Our tech companies would eventually go abroad to NASDAQ to IPO, and it means that you have to be huge. So it's something that you see, we used to see once in a decade or so on. And now the local stock market has evolved a lot. And that's something to do with COVID as well. The number of investments doubled during the pandemic. And lots of new companies and tech companies are opening their capital in the local market. We had more than 10 IPOs in the past year, all related to tech.
Incredible.
So, you know, many things going on.
Very impressive. And Francisco, are we seeing a similar development in Colombia at the moment? What are you excited about?
Well, thank you, Mark. I was just saying that it's really interesting to hear Felipe and Rocio. A lot of what they are describing resonates with what is going on in the Colombian ecosystem. I'll start with the macro picture. We also passed an entrepreneurship bill to improve the local rules and the legislation related to entrepreneurship and innovation. And what that really is doing is creating a better framework for the creation of funds, financing opportunities for startups, also conditions for the attraction of talent to Colombia. We want to become a hub of digital talent, and we want not only our own talent base to improve, but also a foreign talent to see an opportunity to establish themselves in Colombia and participate in this tech revolution that is going on. A second trend that we are really excited about is the development of specific verticals and subsectors that are growing very fast and in which we see a lot of promise. We are the third fintech ecosystem in the region, but also besides fintech, we're seeing a lot of growth and opportunity in sectors like edtech, just seeing what the pandemic has shown us in terms of gaps to be closed and addressed in terms of education access and education quality. That is a huge opportunity, and a lot of movement is going on in that sector. Also, in health tech, there is a big movement of collaboration among industry regulators and startups to continue the trend of remote provision of medical services and medical diagnosis. So that is interesting, what we will see in the coming years regarding to health tech. GovTech is another vertical that we are really promoting to tie startups and their services to the digital transformation of government, both at the national level and also at the regional level. And all of this really what we expect to see is a lot of startups going into those sectors that also have a large social impact and social component to them besides the economic metrics.
Thank you so much, Francisco. This gives us a very good first idea of what you're seeing and what you're working on. Felipe, one question to you. I mean, what are some of the things that ABS right now is working on? Because it's quite obvious that, you know, the trends and the signals are quite positive, but then you don't want to take a rest, right? You want to make sure that the ecosystem keeps growing and that the opportunities continue to emerge. What needs to be done? What are some of the most critical next steps looking ahead into the future for the next 1 or 2 years?
Thanks for the question, Mark. Yeah, of course, we can't take anything for granted and keep pushing it, right? I would say some of the main challenges that we have, and those are the ones we are working the most at AB Startups. One is the inequality of access of resources across different regions in the ecosystem. So Brazil is a very large country, and you can't compare the level of access to capital and resources in cities like São Paulo and Rio and other regions of Brazil. So we've been working a lot to help developing local communities of entrepreneurship and help them succeed and grow. And in that sense, the COVID-19 pandemic actually helped, because it removed some geographic barriers. We couldn't meet in person, so being in São Paulo or being in the northeast of Brazil would be the same. Another thing is the talent gap. We see that with the rapid growth of the ecosystem, there's a growing demand for talent, and the offer of talent is not growing at the same pace. So there are a lot of actions and projects that are working on with the private sector and with the government to increase the offer of qualification for tech talent. And I believe this is probably the biggest challenge for the decade, not only in Brazil, but in Latin America. And definitely that's also why I personally took the decision to start a new venture in education, Sirius University. We've been work a lot with intelligence and producing data. Until 2 or 3 years ago, we had very few data sets, qualified data sets of what was going on in terms of investment, startups, and all the aspects of it. And we're trying to produce better data to have better insights, and then be able to produce better policies out of that.
I mean, this is obviously something that I can only support, Felipe, as you know. It's great to hear that.
Definitely.
So we have about 2-3 minutes left, and this is, of course, a big opportunity for you to share any piece of wisdom or advice with our audience of policymakers, knowing that all of you have very rich experience in trying to support entrepreneurial communities. Are there any 1 or 2 pieces of advice or anything you would like to share as final words with our audience today? Perhaps, Rocio, something that comes to mind for you?
Sure. Well, you have the report, right? It's an awesome report, but I truly believe that each country, it's completely different. We have our own realities, but we have some things in common, right? So you have to learn from your mistakes, but it's better if you learn from others' mistakes, right? So I will start asking to the different countries that we have to learn from the mistakes of the other countries and take the best of it and try to implement it in our own. I truly believe that we have our own voice, but we have to learn from other mistakes. It's not necessary to fail if somebody already did it for the same reason, right? So, and the other thing is about climate change and gender gap, and I'm going to push harder on it because I truly believe it's going to be a game changer globally, and startups have a huge opportunity to start working with solutions to that.
Absolutely agreed with that. Thank you so much. Francisco, anything that comes to mind for you?
Absolutely. I think that Latin America is, as the report shows, we're just getting started in terms of the potential of this startup ecosystem, in terms of the potential to address and to find innovative solutions to a lot of global challenges. Latin America is the ideal place to find conditions in terms of social challenges and opportunities, environmental challenges and opportunities. This is the region where you find the drive, the signals in terms of growth of ecosystems, the signals in terms of connectedness of those ecosystems, not only within each of our countries, Brazil, Chile, and Colombia, but increasingly interconnected as a region. So I would invite policymakers, investors who are watching the sessions and who are reading the reports to really keep an eye out for what is going on in the tech and in general the startup ecosystem of this region, because I think we're only beginning to see the potential of really innovative, high growth, profitable, but also solutions with deep impact in terms of social and environmental challenges as well.
Thank you, Francisco. Felipe, you have the last words.
Yeah, well, when I think of Latin America, I think that the word potential resonates a lot with this moment. I was looking at some figures, and when you look at the market cap of tech companies in the countries and compare it with the GDP, like the US is like almost 70% of their GDP is market cap in tech companies. China is 30%, and Latin America is 3.4%. So there's a huge avenue for growth by using tech and leverage on tech to leapfrog.
Thank you so much, Felipe. Rocio, Francisco, Felipe, thank you so much for sharing a few of your latest insights with us and our community today. I can say in summary, there is a lot happening, a lot of exciting news from LATAM, and really wish you the best of luck in order to really sustain that growth and continue to write the success story that you've been writing for the past couple of months and years. Thank you so much again.
And now a word from the Vice Governor of the Tokyo Metropolitan Government.
Hello, everyone. My name is Madam Miyasaka, Vice Governor of the Tokyo Metropolitan Government. Thank you very much for inviting me today to the Global Report Launch Event 2021. And I would also like to thank JF, Mark, the Startup Genome team, and all the audience today for the opportunity to speak. At Tokyo Metropolitan Government, we have announced our Future of Tokyo strategy last March, which we regard as a new compass for navigating towards Tokyo's bright future. In this strategy, Tokyo has set a goal of becoming #1 startup city in the globe, generating new industries one after another. For one of the KPIs, we aim for ranking #5 in GSER by 2030 and #1 by 2040. In this year's GSER, we were able to make a leap from last year's #15 to #9. This is achievement of everyone's effort and contributions in Tokyo's startup ecosystem, including Tokyo companies, universities, municipalities, etc. And we as Tokyo Metropolitan Government is very delighted to hear that Tokyo was highly evaluated. Based on the current startup ecosystem and the outcomes of initiatives, we believe there are 3 reasons that Tokyo has moved up its ranking. First is that in Japan, the whole startup boom has been happening from around 2014, and based on the experience and knowledge from them, the number of active investors with AUM over $100 million and highly experienced venture capitals have increased. Second, as a result, the investment in startups has been booming after the global financial crisis in 2008. And despite the impact of COVID-19, the amount raised per startup in 2020 reached a record high. Lastly, the IPOs of startups with software as a service and digital transformation were accelerated from demands related to COVID-19. And the largest number of companies have been listed since 2008. Tokyo believes that community with a wide range of industries is at most important in order to form a strong startup ecosystem which can support entrepreneurship and startup business expansion. Therefore, the Tokyo Metropolitan Government established the Tokyo Consortium in January 2020, a community consisting of more than 200 companies and organizations. In this consortium, we are proceeding with efforts to form an ecosystem, for example, creating innovation through industry, academia, government collaboration, and promoting university-based healthcare projects. In addition, we are supporting startups to accelerate their business by providing our government field to conduct their feasibility studies. Also, we are pushing the digital transformation of Tokyo metropolitan government with the help of startups. Tokyo has great potential for startup growth with its world-class economic base, holding 40 million people, $1 trillion GDP, which is 70th by countries in globe, and 250,000 companies, including 2,400 non-Japanese companies. Given these foundations, the status of startup, and the abundant knowledge and experience of human resources at universities, research institutes, and private companies, etc. There is so much room for development in the Tokyo's ecosystem, and I believe we are now just standing at the start line. Taking today's opportunities, we'd like to share the knowledge we have cultivated so far and continuously exchange information of startup ecosystem with all the participants today. We hope the startup ecosystem will be further activated and expanded not only in Tokyo, but throughout the world.
Now we move on to the State of the Asia Pacific Startup Ecosystem panel with JF as our moderator.
Thank you. And now I'm with distinguished guests from all over the Asia Pacific region, and I'm happy to welcome them on this panel to talk about the state of the APAC startup ecosystems. And I will ask each of you to introduce yourself to our audience, starting with Minister Uno.
Thank you, Mr. Gauthier. Hi, Pa Edwin and Mr. Quat. My name is Sandy Uno, and I work at the Ministry for Tourism and Creative Economy of the Republic of Indonesia. I've been in my current position since December of last year, and currently I oversee the revival of the tourism and creative economy sectors during the pandemic, which approximately covers around 34 million workers. Previous to this, my positions was Vice Governor of the capital city of Jakarta. And before that, I was an entrepreneur in the investments and finance sector.
Thank you so much, Mr. Minister Uno, for being with us. And it's always good to have an entrepreneur with us. Mr. Edwin Chow, please welcome.
Thank you, JF. Good to be with you again. Hello to Minister Uno and Mr. Quat. Good to see you again as well. I'm Edwin Chow. I represent Enterprise Singapore, a government agency of Singapore whose mandate is to help Singapore-based enterprises to grow, both here and overseas. And of course, startups, tech startups are an important segment of those companies. And I look forward to hearing and exchanging views with everyone on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Edwin. And also Mr. Quat, who is joining us from Vietnam today.
Okay, thank you, Sir Genome. Hello, my colleagues from Indonesia, Singapore, and the United States. My name is Pham Hong Quat. I'm working for the National Agency for Technology Commercialization and Development under the Ministry of Science and Technology of Vietnam. We are in charge of building the national startup ecosystem in Vietnam and support for startup to integrate it into the regions and in the world. So I would like to share some information about our ecosystem and the promising project to support for startup in the academic and to overcome the COVID pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Quat. And we're all here today to talk about, celebrate what the exciting things that have happened in our ecosystems in the last year and a half. And, we've been talking about the global startup revolution at Startup Genome since 2011. And last year, I feel like it really came true. And I'd like each of you to share one exciting thing that happened in your ecosystem in the last year or 2 years that you want to celebrate. And let's start with Minister Uno.
Well, it's been a very difficult time due to the pandemic. And I have been really focusing on each specific subsectors. We have 17 subsectors in the creative economy, but if you would ask for one particular success, I would say the emergence of the development of applications and games in the Indonesia startup scene. We are seeing that startup capital investments during the first half of 2020 is the largest in Southeast Asia. And Jakarta is now second in the world's top emerging startup ecosystems. And with the merger between Gojek and Tokopedia, we're actually creating one humongous entity that would provide much more developed ecosystems and providing a better runway for startups in terms of development, in particular within the human capital. So we're focusing on jobs and how this startup ecosystems could create jobs. And there's one or two exciting things that really kept me awake at night, JF. And I think the amount of investment that is being poured in the ecosystems has been very encouraging. The decisions of some of the global players to stay invested during the pandemic in Indonesia really created one very optimistic view of the ecosystems going forward.
Thank you so much, Minister Uno. And Edwin, tell us one thing that happened in your ecosystem during the pandemic. And I know Singapore has also boomed during the pandemic. It's going to be a hard choice.
Yes, thanks, JF. Firstly, I think this is a fantastic topic because the pandemic has been too much focus on the downside, the bad news, and condolences to everyone who's lost friends and families. But I think if there's one thing that's worth celebrating, the startup ecosystem, not just in Singapore, but as you've just heard from around Southeast Asia, has really boomed last year. In particular, the venture capital investments that took place last year, and the fact that in Singapore we now have 6 newly minted unicorns in 2021. So in the depths of the pandemic, there are 6 startups now to join 11 others. So we now have 17 sort of homegrown or Singapore nurtured unicorns. And they were part of the 5.3 billion Singapore dollars of venture funding that was recorded in the first half of this year. This is like a 50% increase over the same period last year. And what gives me a great optimism for the future is the majority of these deals, these 355 deals, are actually in the sort of seed Series A stage, sort of early to mid stage, which bodes well because the momentum that's created today, I think will see us through resulting in more successful exits, unicorns in the coming years, and more jobs and economic value created for people here in Singapore and the region.
Thank you so much, Edwin. Mr. Kwat, tell us one thing that you're excited about.
Yeah, thank you. One thing I would like to share concerning the project supporting the national startup ecosystem, so-called 844 project. The first concept of startup was introduced into Vietnam by the pilot project of the Ministry of Science and Technology in 2013. It was the technology commercialization following the Silicon Valley model in Vietnam. Vietnam Silicon Valley of or VSV project in short. This pilot project introduced and developed the model of the business accelerator in Vietnam. At that time, we could not translate exactly the meaning of the term the business accelerator in Vietnamese. After 3 years from that time, we had a small network of the business accelerators besides the traditional business incubators in Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, Da Nang City, and some big universities. We also received the support from Vietnam Finland Innovation Partnership Program, some experts from Silicon Valley, Jumpstart Program, Cleveland State University in Ohio State, USA, and from Helsinki, Aalto University, Finland, came to help us to design the national support program. We proposed the initiative on a national program supporting the startup ecosystem. The Prime Minister approved this initiative in 2016 by decision number 844. And the terms of startup ecosystem was officially introduced in Vietnam. This program is focusing on the enhancement of the BA network capacity and the promotion of the startup cultures in the country. The Prime Minister also announced the slogan Startup Nation in the years of 2016. And after 3 years running the 844 project, the landscapes and the positions of the national startup ecosystem was improved radically. Vietnam jumps from number 3 to number 6 in ASEAN national ecosystems after Singapore and Indonesia under the assessment of the regional agency.
Thank you so much, Mr. Quat. And this level of success has come with a lot of hard work from each of you and your teams. Minister Uno, tell us one policy, that we can share with our audience today of policymakers all over the world, one policy that you're really proud of having implemented.
Well, we have instituted, JF, several policies in the past 12 months. And if we can name one policy that has been really helpful in the ecosystem, I would probably choose a program called Backup, which stands for Baparekra for Startup. It's a program that incubates 200 Indonesian startups divided into 3 levels: growth rate, accelerations, and scale up. These startups are given various training and mentoring and and we arrange matchmaking with venture capital to open cooperations opportunities. We have a large market and we want to make sure that these startups would be able to access the market, access the capital, access the human capital aspects of incubation. So there are training of trainers, so TOT for founders, practitioners, and I'd like to share their 4 top finalists of each city. And these are the biggest city in Indonesia, namely Jakarta, Surabaya, and Medan and Makassar. For Jakarta, we have Calm, which is a platform to provide access to mental health professionals. During COVID, mental health become such a huge issue. And I would say that this Calm would be eventually a decacorn, because 20% of people around the world have been identified as having some sort of like a mental health situations that needs to be addressed from a very mild one to a severe one. From Surabaya, there is a Indo Get Job, and jobs are very, very difficult to get during the pandemic. So these applications help job seekers create a widest opportunities for them to choose. From Medan, we have La Kopi, which is a marketplace for green coffee beans. I'm sure, JF, you like coffee, and this connects producers with coffee processors. And then from Makassar, finally, it's Rekan Legal, which is one-stop platform to understand the regulations and the legality of business. And this backup has been ongoing for the last 12 months, but this has been one of the program that we, together with the Digital Talent Program, we provide Android facilitations and web development, and also certificates to creative actors in applications and game developer subsectors. And we have close to 1,550 developers that have been aided by this program. JF, thank you.
Thank you so much. Edwin, one policy that you're proud of, and I know you're very active on that front. So
yeah, so I'm going to cheat. I'm going to cheat a bit, JF, and I'll use the one policy which covers like 7 maybe. But now, jokes aside, it's we have a program that we've been running called the Startup SG for almost 4 or 5 years now, and this is a comprehensive program that incentivizes at the very beginning, first-time founders to encourage more Singaporean and Singapore-based founders to start companies. There are grant programs to help speed up the commercialization of research, where we give up to $750,000 to support the first prototype development of what we call deep tech startups. We have a co-investment program under Startup SG Equity, where we match $1 for every $1 that a startup manages to raise in the private sector. And we have a program called the Startup SG Accelerator, where we work directly with incubators, accelerators from around the world, right, to set up in Singapore, to set up dedicated programs to help some of these early stage startups. But I think the one thing that I believe made the most difference over the past two and a half years, sort of since the pandemic, really was our Global Innovation Alliance program. And this is the one where we help Singapore-based startups to find international partners to scale up globally. As many of you know, Singapore is a very small market. And in order for our startups to go from sort of a seed to a late stage growth company, they need to fan out as quickly as possible to attain product market fit as quickly as possible. So over the past 2 years, we've set up what we call GIA nodes in about 15 different cities, including Jakarta and Ho Chi Minh. And since then, we've supported nearly 200 or so startups in these programs all around the world. And pleasantly surprised to note that nearly 30% of them have managed to secure some kind of commercial investor or talent partnerships in those nodes. And to do this in a time of COVID, to switch from a sort of an offline, a face-to-face mode to one that is completely digital, that's been something of a win for us, and something that I'm particularly proud of.
Thank you. Yeah, you must be. Congratulations on that. Mr. Quat, one policy that you're very proud of that your team and you have implemented.
Yes. In the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, the most exciting thing for us over the 1.5 years essentially was the series of the TechFest events. The Tech Startup Festival, or the National Demo Day for startup in Vietnam, was organized on the internet by the virtual showcase and webinar instead of the traditional showcase and conference. By the restrictions from the COVID control orders, making these events happen was a great challenge for our team. The initiative encouraging the social entities and the university participating the events under the name of the technology villages was a great idea that helped us overcoming the challenges in the new normal. The topics of TechFest Vietnam in the years of 2021 is embracing innovation, reshaping future. We have announced the kickoff of the TechFest event with 16 technology villages on 15th September, and the final demo day will take place on 15th December of this year. So we hope that the TechFest of this year, we will receive the good project, the new model from different areas, from different technology villages, to have the economy, to have the SME to overcome the pandemic.
Thank you so much, Mr. Quat, and thank you to the three of you for coming together today to really share one success and one policy that others can learn from. It's been a lot of work for all of you. I know we've been working with many of you to go through the pandemic and save the ecosystems, and I'm really happy, like you, that at the end of the day, the ecosystems have boomed and thrived in this world where we saw an acceleration to digital economy. So thank you so much, Minister Uno, Mr. Chow, and Mr. Quat, respectively from Indonesia, Singapore, and Vietnam. Thank you.
Let's now hear from the Deputy Mayor for the Economic Policy Office of the Seoul Metropolitan Government.
Hello everyone, I'm Boyon Hwang, Deputy Mayor for Economic Policy at Seoul Metropolitan Government. I'm very grateful and honored for the opportunity to speak at this meaningful event. As Deputy Mayor for Economic Policy at the Seoul Metropolitan Government, I'm very impressed by Seoul's remarkable rise to 16th place in the global startup ecosystem rankings, which has risen 4 steps from 20th last year. Very pleased to see the growth of Seoul's ecosystem over the last year. However, it is not an entirely unexpected outcome, considering the effort that we have made and the resources that we have committed to vibrant our startup ecosystem so far. Mayor of Seoul also has a great interest in fostering startups, and he is fully supportive in a variety of ways to make our ecosystem innovative and globally attractive. I believe that all these efforts are reflected in the rising number of unicorns emerging from the Seoul ecosystem. As of today, Seoul has 11 unicorns that have billion-dollar valuations, and their businesses are in diverse fields such as fintech, gaming, delivery services, and so on. With the aim of becoming a global top 5 startup ecosystem in the world, Seoul Metropolitan Government has implemented various policies to cultivate high-potential startups that can turn COVID-19 crisis into an opportunity. We had implemented 3 projects last year. First, payroll cost support for 10,000 technical personnel of startups with $42 million. Second, providing growth package to 100 promising startups with $85,000 each. Lastly, establishing $100 million fund for fast-growing startups. We believe that active and complete support for startups at this crisis is crucial. To be a global top 5 startup city, reaching overseas market is one of the essential elements. To support our startups going global, we have learned the Global Market Project. We were trying to find reliable partners and global companies to pull and help Seoul-based startups to settle in new markets. Finally, we have opened the Seoul Startup Hub, Ho Chi Minh, in Vietnam, which serves as a local hub to assist startups in Seoul to make overseas entirely with active support from foreign government agencies. This is the first case in which Seoul's startup incubation policy is exported overseas, and also our first ever global hub for startups. I would introduce another recent partnership we have made. Seoul Startup Hub and the Korean International Trade Association will utilize Barcelona, Spain, as the stage for Korean startups, global scale-up, and to promote overseas testbed project. We expect that the testbed business will provide an opportunity for Korean startups to test their innovative technologies and solutions abroad. The association and the Seoul Startup Hub will support the proof of concept in local landmarks such as Innovation District in Barcelona. For the last decade, Seoul's constant and steady investment has upgraded Seoul's startup ecosystem to a global level. It is unfortunate that the COVID-19 pandemic hit the world just when the world started to pay its attention to the startup landscape of Seoul. Undaunted by the pandemic, however, we will further strengthen and expand support to turn this crisis into an opportunity.
Now we move on to the State of the Middle East and North Africa Startup Ecosystem panel with Stefan Kuster as our moderator.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm delighted to welcome our audience today to the Global Startup Ecosystem Report 2121 launch and our perspective and panel discussion today in respect to developments in the MENA region. I'm delighted to be joined today by Tala Al-Ansari, Director of the District 2020 and Innovation Ecosystem in Dubai at Expo Dubai. Delighted to have Issam Al-Tukair, the Vice Governor of Moonshot for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with us today. And I'm delighted to welcome Amr Mahfouz, the Chief Executive Officer of ITI-DA based in Cairo and representing Egypt. And without further ado, maybe you introduce yourself just very briefly. Tala, do you want to start?
Sure. So I have the privilege of overlooking the legacy of Expo 2020 as the director of the innovation ecosystem and the global entrepreneur program we have called Scale to Dubai.
Thank you, Tala. And Amr, if you would introduce yourself very briefly.
Yeah, so my name is Amr Mahfouz. I am the Chief Executive Officer for the Information Technology Development Agency, ITIDA, which is responsible for developing the IT market in Egypt, as well as the entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem. And the third pillar we have is the electronic signature. We are the entity responsible for governing and promoting these three pillars in the country. As well, we are the executive arm for the Ministry of Information Technology and Communication.
Great pleasure to have you with a very significant ecosystem that has developed in Egypt, particularly in Cairo. Delighted to have you. Thank you. Issam, if you would introduce yourself very briefly as well.
Yes. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm the Vice Governor for Entrepreneurship in the Small and Medium Enterprise Authority, Munshaat. We are responsible about the entrepreneurship and innovation in Saudi Arabia. We have different arms working regarding the funding startups to building hubs to accelerators and all disruptive and future technology.
Thank you, Issam. And looking at the MENA region and our insights from the GSER 2021, it is a success story. It speaks of dynamism, very similar to what we see in many other ecosystems around the world. I think we all got a push from what was this awful pandemic, which has really unleashed entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurial forces, including investment. And that's very, very visible in the MENA region. I'm delighted to say that when we look at investment, always a good indicator of value creation, in the MENA region over the last 5 years, late stage funding has almost doubled or has doubled. We see individual ecosystems really jumping the rankings in the GSER, and jumping in rankings is difficult as every ecosystem or most ecosystems tend to grow. So jumping a rank is really something special. Dubai managed to jump 7 spots to number 11 in the top 100 emerging ecosystems. So huge dynamism, that's very obvious. We see a lot of investment into AI and big data. No surprises here. It is the technology that cuts across all the industrial subsectors and brings so much productivity, but it's great to see how it is being adapted across the MENA region. And looking at the top performers first, number one, no surprise, Tel Aviv, which is holding that spot in the region for a long, long time, followed by Dubai and Cairo, Riyadh and Abu Dhabi. And then we have what we call the regional challenges, so the smaller but fast growth ecosystems, being Amman on number 1, Bahrain, Casablanca, and Sharjah again in the UAE. Just to give us a very brief overview. But again, as having said, the dynamism is great. We've seen interesting funding around Series A, B, even a number of very significant companies heading for exit. All of that speaks for dynamism and value creation in the ecosystems across the MENA region. That said, I would like to jump right into our discussion. And we've been talking about the global startup revolution for the last 10 years at Startup Genome. And we believe that the data is evidence to that it really came through more than ever in the last year. I mentioned many more ecosystems participating in the value creation that startups and scale-ups do provide. We would love to ask you to share the 1 or 2 exciting and upbeat things that happened over the last 12 to 15 months in your respective ecosystems, for others to learn, to understand what has been happening, to be inspired. And maybe, Amr, we start with you and Egypt. Tell us a little bit what happened over the last 12 to 15 months that's noteworthy.
Thank you, Stephen. And maybe, as you said, there has been a lot happening in Egypt over the past 12 to 15 months. And I believe that the government role is to be a catalyst and enabler. And this is what we've been trying to do over the past period. So there has been a number of exciting initiatives that the government has taken to stimulate the overall ecosystem. So we have multiplied the number of innovation hubs in the whole country. Before that, maybe we had 1 or 2 based in Cairo and Alexandria. Now we have about 12. And before the year end, they will reach 17, and they are spread among different governorates. So we want to enable our force and our talents where they are. And we don't want them to come to Cairo or Alexandria to have a better opportunity. So this is, and we are providing them with an end-to-end services, starting from training them, technical training, soft skills training, entrepreneurship training. So this is something that is very exciting. And we have witnessed this year that year to date, we have more than doubled the investments that came to startups in Egypt over the last year. Over the past 3 years, we've been growing about 30% year over year. This year we have doubled. So that explains that there has been some exciting things happening last year that's started to yield. We believe that the big advantage that we have is the skills pool. So we have about 600,000 university graduates each year. 50,000 of them are IT graduates. And we are providing massive training, online training all over the country. Free training. So over the past year, we have trained about 120,000 graduates and experienced people over different skills, including entrepreneurship, freelancing, digital marketing, data science, web development. So that again has yielded. And Egypt does not only have the skills, but our skills are affordable. So a programmer, a junior programmer that has about 2 years of experience in Egypt would cost less than $10,000 a year. Similar skill in Europe is about $40,000 a year. So that gives the magnitude and that explains the increased amount of investment that is coming to Egypt. Also, we are a big country, more than 100 million. The population is more than 100 million. So every initiative that relates to consolidating the market and providing better service will succeed. We have several examples of that. You've seen Swivel that started in Egypt and had maybe a very good idea about integrating the transportation system, and is a very good example that is rolling out to other developing countries. We have Visita, and we have others that are providing the e-commerce and better business models. And we have also the technology and innovative startups that are providing deep technology innovations in artificial intelligence, in Internet of Things, agriculture, healthcare. So we believe that this is what have been happening. Also, we have developed a 5-year strategy with a major consulting firm that we have finalized, and it's going to determine what we are going to do next from 2021 to 2026, where we have very ambitious plans that maybe we can share.
We come to that in a moment. Amr, first of all, I'm delighted to hear that you're investing so much into skills development, making accessible entrepreneurship, tech entrepreneurship to a broad part of the student population. And secondly, also the idea of farming out entrepreneurial success so that it is not only concentrated in a capital city, but a much broader part of the population is actually participating. We've seen that in a number of very successful ecosystems that have taken the step in a capital city, but then have broadened it out, and certainly that is hugely successful. Tala, if I may move over to Dubai, the UAE, interesting, relevant developments you're really proud of, you want to share, please.
Sure. I think in terms of celebrating something, the biggest thing that's worth celebrating in Dubai is the city's resilience. We were actually named the world's most resilient city in 2021 by the UN. And that really reflects our government's agility and the response that they had, especially in challenging times of COVID last year. When we looked at how the entire ecosystem in the city of Dubai could support startups, we looked at how can we first help startups survive and support them in terms of liquidity. And there was a lot of, there was a government guaranteed scheme program and a stimulus package of 1.5 million dirhams to help the startups. And the second element was really around how do we secure talent in such challenging times. And so we came up with multiple visas. So we had a remote work visa, which was very popular. We had people from all over the world based here in Dubai working remotely. We have a citizenship, which we actually granted to investors, scientists, specialists that are focused in STEM, as well as changes actually in kind of like foreign ownership. Now there can be 100% foreign ownership in the mainland in Dubai, not just in the free zones as well. But I think what's also worth mentioning, which you touched on, Stephen, was really the aspect of funding. So Dubai is actually the first when it comes to attracting funding in the entire MENA region. More than $577 million worth has been our share in the VC landscape so far. And we're expecting it to reach 1 billion by the end of this year, which is really exciting. I think Amr also mentioned Swivel, the Egyptian company. So they had relocated their headquarters into Dubai and listed on the NASDAQ market actually, and gained up to $1.5 billion, as a part of that listing. And they're the first Middle East unicorn on NASDAQ for that. So we're quite proud of these stories. The last thing I want to say is our ranking on the World Competitive Index. So the UAE ranked 9th as a result of its great policies when it comes to tax and business legislation. And this is really what's helped us surpass even the US, UK, and Germany on that ranking as well.
It's great to hear, and thank you on behalf of entrepreneurial communities for supporting our startup entrepreneurs. I think we did a lot of studies as COVID hit the ecosystem, starting in the east and going further to the west as the pandemic spread, and we really shouted at every political influencer and relevant minister politely but strongly to say this needs securing. You need to support for a brief period of time in order to avoid us losing entrepreneurs. So I'm so glad you supported the entrepreneurs in the UAE and Dubai specifically. Isam, looking at the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, relevant developments you're really proud of over the last 12-15 months.
Thank you very much, Mr. All. I would love to say thank you for everyone, and we have a say on behalf of Saudi Arabia with the great leader of His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman. He has a say that if the economy of Saudi Arabia improved, everyone around Saudi Arabia will improve. So this is the say that we really believe in Saudi Arabia. Small and Medium Enterprises Authority has been established in 2016. The reason of establishing Munsha'at is to have 35% from our GDP came from the startups and small businesses. Since what we are proud of, we have seen a huge development across the entrepreneurship ecosystem between the private sector, public sector, local and international, between countries even though. So we are, Saudi Arabia has jumped 30 points in ease of doing business in 2020. And not only this, the government, since the COVID and the pandemic has been done, the effective of startups was huge. So the incentives reached $10 billion within only 1 year, and it's continuous. In Munshaat, we helped more than 5,000 startups to be alive during the pandemic. We help them. We have different programs on building capabilities. We have a scale-up programs. Our ultimate goal, not to think only about Saudi Arabia as an ecosystem, but the scalability of the business. We launched an international entrepreneur visa with our government entity, Ministry of Investments. We licensed more than 400 startups, international startups, to come to Saudi Arabia from 45 countries. And they are working now in Saudi Arabia as same as the Saudi startups. Not only this, on World Bank, the World Bank, emphasize on the GEM report, the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, Saudi Arabia from 2018, we were ranked 41. On 2019, we were 19. And in 2020, we were number 7. With our colleague, in UAE, with our colleague in Egypt, I think we are working to award the same vision, the same mission. We are working on the similar market, and we contribute with the G20. Saudi Arabia is the country that contributes in G20. We led the subcommittee in entrepreneurship, and we launched a paper that don't compare Middle East, or don't compare Saudi Arabia to China or Europe or USA. We are comparing Middle East to China. We are comparing Middle East to USA, because if you are in Egypt, it's not difficult to access Saudi. If you are in Dubai, it's just 1 hour flight to come to Saudi Arabia. The openness of all kingdom, all government. Believe me, we are very proud, not only in Saudi Arabia, of what's the movement that's happening. We are proud of the movement worldwide, in addition to Middle East and other countries.
Isam, thank you so much, and well put. So what I'm hearing is great dynamism. There's a clear understanding, acceptance, support for entrepreneurship across the MENA region. That's what I'm hearing very clearly from all of you. Very distinct, very substantial investments, support for entrepreneurial communities, and you've really started reaping the benefits. There is dynamism. Our data show that very, very clearly. Impressive. There is investment, significant investment, almost doubled. We mentioned it across the region, actually. And we are looking at really large talent pools as well. I'm glad Isam, Amr, and Tala, you all mentioned it. This idea of a cross collaboration, to see yourself, the region as a market for your companies, not only to start, but to scale. Regional scaling is certainly something they should be looking at very early on. So great to have that perspective from the MENA region. I have to thank you. We are almost out of time. We got such a good look and broad perspective from the three of you. So let me thank you again, Tala, for Dubai and Expo 2020, the innovation. Isam for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Amr to give us the perspective from Cairo and the national perspective from Egypt. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, and we hope to continue our dialogue in due course.
Next, let's hear from the General Manager of the Great Wall Enterprise Institute.
非常高兴能够再次参加2021年全球创业生态系统报告的交流和研讨。借这个机会，我也想和各位分享一下关于中国 创新生态系统的一些观察。首先，我们从数据来看，那么2020年中国新创办公司的数量达到890万家，比2019年增长22%。那么从新创办公司的数量来看，中国创业生态系统仍然保持着比较强的活力。那么另一方面，我们也可以看一下中国创业的质量。我们从独角兽和潜在独角兽企业的发展来衡量。那么2020年12月31日，中国有独角兽企业251家，其中超级独角兽企业12家。那么2020年新的独角兽企业有72家，当年也有24家独角兽企业上市。我们再来看一下中国的潜在独角兽企业，到2020年12月31日为止，有潜在独角兽企业425家，其中当年新的独角兽企业是潜在独角兽企业248家，那么有29家成长为独角兽，那么11家上市。那么另一方面，我们也可以看到，随着国际环境的变化，特别是中美贸易摩擦和技术竞争的加剧，那么中国在一些关键的技术领域的创业和早期投资有明显的增加。比较典型的如集成电路、商业航天、新能源和智能汽车以及量子科技这些领域，新的独角兽企业和潜在独角兽企业数量有明显的增加。那另一方面也可以看到，受新冠疫情的影响，生命健康领域的独角兽企业和潜在独角兽企业的数量也有明显的增加。典型的如创新药研发和创新的医疗器械和基因科技为代表的这些领域的独角兽和潜在独角兽有明显的增加。那么包括健康管理、人工智能辅助诊疗、医疗大数据、互联网医院和医药电商。那么另一方面，我们也可以看到，从2021年6月以来，中国政府持续出台了很多监管的法规，对互联网教育，对这个互联网教育，包括这个游戏的领域，持续加强了监管。那么这些领域的监管，那么对这些领域的创业和早期投资会有明显的影响。当然，因为在发展过程中，后续的影响还有待进一步的观察。好，谢谢大家。
Now we move on to the state of the North American startup ecosystem with Trish Naik as our moderator. All right, welcome everyone to the state of the North American ecosystem. My name is Trisha Naik and I'm here from Startup Genome, moderating an all-star panel. Jack, I'll start off with you with introductions.
Great, thanks, Trisha. And hi, everyone. It's really great to be here today. My name is Jack McDougall, and I'm President and CEO of the Greater Washington Board of Trade. We're an association representing industry, government agencies, academia, and nonprofits. So we really do have a holistic perspective on how we're building out our ecosystems here in the Greater Washington region. So looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you. Us as well. Mark, please go next.
Hi, I'm Mark Thomas. I lead the Pittsburgh Regional Alliance, which is the regional business investment organization for the 10 counties that make up southwestern Pennsylvania. I'm happy to be here and look forward to talking about all things that we're doing to support startups and companies that are investing in innovation.
Lovely. Thank you, Mark. Julie, please take it away.
Hi, such a pleasure to join you. I'm Julie Heath, Vice President of Entrepreneurial Ecosystems at Indiana's Economic Development Corporation. This is a new role. I'm on day 7, and I came here from, as I was previously Chief Executive Officer of Indiana's original co-working space for entrepreneurs.
Lovely. Thank you, Julie. And Joe, please close us out.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Donovan. I run the Office of Innovation, Technology, and Entrepreneurship for Mississippi Development Authority, which is the state's economic development engine. We're part of the state office.
All right, fabulous, Joe. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for joining. Got a relatively short panel today, so we're going to be hitting highlights around startup ecosystem acceleration, using some of what we have recently just learned, of course, that came out in the Global Startup Ecosystem Report. So I'd love to start us off, and maybe Jack, I'll turn this one initially to you. I'd love to hear about one or two exciting things that have happened in your ecosystem recently that you'd like to celebrate.
So I was thinking about that question a little bit. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different tact on it. And, our region's kind of interesting. I mean, every region has its own interesting, challenges and opportunities. Ours is, it's the metropolitan statistical area for Greater Washington. So we have about 6 million people, about 500 billion a year in economic output. We have the federal government, we have 2 state governments, we have a city government, and then we have 37 different jurisdictions within those jurisdictions. And so trying to do anything across our region is challenging, if I could say. So one of the things that, we've really been focused on too is, are some of the more fundamental building blocks. So just how do you even get more and more folks to participate in entrepreneurial activities? How do you get people around? So one of the things that our region was very disadvantaged was around transit. So we have the second largest public transit system in the United States, yet it had no dedicated funding. So we were unable to make really capital improvements. We were capped at 3% spending growth year over year. And so that didn't allow us to make significant improvements and upgrades. And so our system wasn't providing or meeting the needs of people across our region. And then the other thing about our transit system is that it was designed to service the federal government way back in the 1960s. So to take everybody from all the bedroom communities surrounding downtown DC and at peak rush hour in and out, bringing people. But the economy in the world doesn't work like that anymore. And particularly the entrepreneurial world doesn't work like that anymore. So people need to be able to get around easily day and night, 7 days a week. And so we set about, and I think one of the greatest accomplishments that we've had here is that we actually did finally get dedicated funding. And we did dedicated funding, $5 billion over a 10-year horizon, which now allows us to make really significant improvements in the level of service that we're providing across the region. And so that for us was a really major breakthrough. And that now opens the door to a whole host of other types of things that we can do regionally that will improve our ability to compete. And to give you one really significant outcome from that, that was one of the key factors. That, talent, and a couple of other things were the key factors ultimately in bringing Amazon to our region, which opens up a just huge potential around entrepreneurs and the startup ecosystem.
Yes, that's fabulous. Thank you for sharing, Jack. Julie, same question for you. Within Indiana, what are one or two most exciting things that are going on in your startup ecosystem?
Well, I think I'll focus on the community building that's happened around Indiana. And community building is powerful because it really does 3 things. One, it allows us to double down on our regional strengths, such as low cost of living and an impulse toward neighborliness that's sometimes referred to as Hoosier hospitality. It also enables the conditions needed by all entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs. So if you're looking at taking 100 entrepreneurs and making sure you've created the conditions such that all of them have a chance to launch, community building does that, as opposed to picking winners, which often comes up in capital conversations. It also optimizes for 2 out of the 3 things that all entrepreneurs need. I think of it as time, talent, treasure. And what's great about community building is that it works really well for smaller cities and also younger ecosystems, because with time and with talent, you can actually work around a lack of capital, which is often a challenge for younger ecosystems. And we can dig into that a little bit more as we talk more about those building blocks.
Lovely. Thank you, Julie. And then lastly, Mark, same question to you within Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so we, back in 2018, had commissioned a study that really looked at Pittsburgh being an underdog with its own lack of really aggressive investment in innovation. And so as a result of that, there have been just a number of initiatives that really started to transform us into the ecosystem we should be. Obviously with COVID, that has forced all of us to really rethink a lot of things tied to inclusion and equity and other related issues. And so coming out of that, plus the research that was done as a precursor to our current activities, it gives us a game plan that we think will really start to make Pittsburgh a place that people will celebrate as a booming tech economy, one that is equitable, one that is accessible, one that has all of these things that are really positioning us to thrive as a place. And so it's kind of a good moment, I think, for all of our cities across the globe, because the rules in my mind have been reset. And so I think the places that have been dominant in the past, this is a moment for the newcomers to really shine.
Yes, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that sentiment. I'm based in Atlanta, and we're seeing a huge influx of people moving here from New York and San Francisco, buying homes in cash, right? And starting businesses here, joining the startup community here. And so while there's brain drain in some places, we're really seeing that in a lot of other cities where there's a lot of reasons to move and a lot of attractive reasons to be here, that we're starting to have even more talent come in. I'd love to move now towards collaboration. And for Joe, Mississippi, this is particularly to you. So Mississippi just seems like they have done a fabulous job in terms of getting government entities, university entities, corporations with big R&D budgets, right, all kind of working together. And with Startup Genome working in Mississippi, it's been one of the more interesting ecosystems where we've seen just such a sense of collaboration. I'd love to start it off with you hearing about really how is that collaboration fostered? Are there any particular tactics that are used to get all these different groups around kind of startups and innovation to be working together?
Sure. And Jack, we're a little smaller than you guys. I think statewide, we're at about 3 million people over 82 counties. So it gives us some different challenges. One of the things that we had is, one, for years we chased smokestacks. We're really good at chasing smokestacks. We'd go out, we'd hunt down a Nissan or Toyota, kill it, drag it back to Mississippi every 4 or 5 years. That really didn't move the needle here. So what we found was we have 4 research-intensive universities, 5 research centers, counting the medical center here in Jackson. We have a very large military research complex, both with NASA, the Naval Research Labs, and ERDIC in Vicksburg. There was some significant changes in leadership in all these at about the same time I came on board about 3 years ago. So I spent the first 2 years just driving around and introducing myself. The state has taken an active role in deciding that, yes, we are a technology state. Yes, we are open for business. And so it's a matter of simply pulling the 4 research-intensive universities together along with the research-intensive military labs. They've got a new DoD mandate that if it doesn't go bang in the night, you should commercialize it. And so that's one of the things we pulled these people together. Startup Genome was an interesting find. Actually, Startup Genome, one of my grad assistants from Saudi Arabia found you guys, which was, amazing. I thought, a miracle find. But it's been the ability to pull everyone together in the same room, searching for the same goal. We've included the nonprofit sector. They can do things that state government can't do. We have an aggressive nonprofit sector that is working for, they're worried about workforce diversity, workforce inclusion. That fits right into a knowledge-based economy. We've done a lot of work with the university curriculums. We help rewrite a lot of the knowledge-based curriculum projects. So it's been an amazing 3-year run, and we just hosted our first large strategic planning session for 2 days at MDA, Mississippi Development Authority. And we had all the university vice chancellors in charge of research, military people in, and we kind of set a pathway for each of us have a piece of the playbook. And we're using the same playbook. Each of us have our pieces now. So how do we implement that? And it's been a pretty exciting time.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. Julie, same question to you. In Indiana, really, how are you fostering collaboration across the ecosystem?
Yeah, I think driving around and introducing yourself certainly resonates, because often the talent part of this equates to know-how, and every zip code has unmet needs, and there are creative people in every zip code that have ideas for products and services to meet those needs, but often they don't know how to get started, or they've gotten started and they get stuck on something, because isn't that the challenge of entrepreneurship? If it hasn't been solved before, you don't have a blueprint. So figuring out what we call know-how through know-who is critical to reducing that friction to move forward from I have a hunch to I'm in ideation to I've got my prototype or MVP built to I've got my first paying customer, fantastic. And then on to those milestones, we look for like $5,000 a month of MRR or $1 million of annual reoccurring revenue. So I agree that driving around, making sure all of the ecosystem builders know each other and understand what each pool of entrepreneurs is trying to accomplish does end up accelerating everybody.
So it's a lot of pounding the pavement. Here in Atlanta, our Chamber of Commerce actually gets all of the heads of the different accelerators, incubators, universities together about once every 6 months. And it just makes a huge difference just to know each other, right? And feel comfortable in reaching out. Well, thank you, Joe and Julie, for giving us feedback on collaboration. I'd love now to turn it over to Mark in Pittsburgh and talk about one initiative that you and your team are really most proud of over this COVID time, whether it's a policy or a program that came out of this time. Would love to hear how Pittsburgh specifically has been catering to the needs of entrepreneurs through this dip of COVID.
Yeah, so I won't say there's like one specific thing. I think there was a specific way of engagement that we pursued, and that was to keep people connected, keep people informed on the opportunities, whether it was federal funding, local state grants. We did a lot of just communication to make sure that every company that was at risk of failing that we could touch, that they were connected to the resources that were needed. And I think that engagement has really forced people to really rethink, okay, how do we make sure we continue this moving forward? That it's not just only when there's a crisis, but that we prioritize our local companies, our local entrepreneurs, our local businesses, while we continue to obviously encourage more companies and others to invest in our region. And I think that is something we're most proud of. And it obviously has really shifted how we think about our work.
Lovely. Thank you, Mark. Jack, same question to you. Within, the greater Washington area, is there a particular either program or policy or relief program that cropped up that you saw that was particularly helpful to entrepreneurs weathering this time?
So I think one of the things, if you think systemically about, improving the environment, is that it is an iterative process, like the other folks here, convening people, bringing people together, but there's a really roll up your sleeves, day-to-day iterative process of working back and forth. So one of the things that we did to take advantage of, a global pandemic that was causing significant hardships was, could we use that to deploy some of the tools and technologies that we need to improve the ecosystem? And so one of those was 5G. Prior to the pandemic, we had 37 different jurisdictions running around with their own different deployment strategies, and that wasn't very effective at all. So we were able to use this opportunity to get people to come to the table and recognize that we needed to be a little bit more sort of orchestrated across the entire region in how we would deploy 5G, and then what is it that we're going to do with 5G once we have it in place. And so what that now has led us to is, and we're at the very early stages of this, but across our region, is to begin a process of regulatory harmonization. So particularly around business startups and particularly around technology companies and how we operate. An example of that would be around health tech and mental health issues that we've all been very concerned about. The certification process to provide mental health services is different across each one of our jurisdictions. So if you live in one jurisdiction, you work in a different jurisdiction, and your therapist is in a third jurisdiction, you might not be able to get the kind of services that you really do need. So how is it that we can level that playing field, which then creates a certain level of scale that then allows entrepreneurs to come in and provide solutions to some of those challenges and problems that we're facing? And so we're really kind of focused on some of the backbone issues that will really unleash this. So, it's not, again, in this region, we'll never have one sort of coordinated approach to anything. And I don't think that's desirable. We're not talking about industrial policy, but really how can you create a much more vibrant playing field so a lot of these things can more spontaneously occur, and then there's a variety of programs underway that, can really take those and bring those to the next level.
Fabulous. Thank you for sharing, Jack. All right. Well, we just have a few minutes left here. We're going to do kind of a 30-second lightning round. So I ask for you each to give about a 30-second response on this one. Would love to send us off with, what are you currently working on to fuel startup success? So is there something in particular you'd like to point to, or anything that you're looking for help with or collaboration with, where viewers today can get in touch with you to take part in it? So I'll kick it off with Julie in Indiana. What are you currently working on, kind of like lightning round style? Take it away.
Well, one of the areas of focus I think that's come to light is the sense of idea flow as being a major driver of any economic outcome we're looking toward. And Sandy Penland at MIT Media Lab has some fantastic studies and writing about this. And I am eager in this new job. I'm on day 7. So credit to IEDC for even creating a VP of Entrepreneurial Ecosystems as a proper role at our state, but then really looking about how that know-how through know-who and via idea flow and the connectivity that I think both Mark and Jack mentioned really can advance our programs.
Thank you, Julie. Mark, please. You're next.
So we're hiring a startup czar, and it kind of building off of the highlights that I mentioned earlier, is that we realize our local companies haven't really interfaced with the infrastructure we have to support them, beyond like their incubator or accelerator or co-working space. And so we want to make sure every startup that is spurred in some kind of way is that we're tracking their success and engaging them.
Lovely. Joe, please.
Changing the flavor of the way people view government. One of the most frightening things that I ever heard when I was in business, I've started and sold 10 businesses, is, hi, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. That should scare the living hell out of most people. But what we've managed to do is change that flavor. When somebody has a problem, when the industry has a problem, when an entrepreneur has a problem or an issue, the first thing I want them to do is pick up the phone and call their local state senator or representative, call us, because our job is to facilitate their growth. And we've managed to change enough of the leadership issues around the state that we understand that's not our role. Our role is to provide them with the resources they need and then get the hell out of the way. So, we're looking at getting rid of as many regulatory issues as we can. And that's one of the advantages of being in a small state, is if you want to see the governor, pick up the phone.
That's awesome. Thank you, Joe.
He'll answer it.
I would hope so. All right, Jack, we'll close it out with you. About 30 seconds left.
Great. So one of the things that we've been doing with our members and partners across the region too is looking at what's next for organizations. What does workflow look like? And creating a thought leadership laboratory so that we can begin to define what it is that organizations are going to need to do as we move forward. What does that look like? And so, I think one of the biggest challenges we have right now is uncertainty. And businesses and entrepreneurs don't necessarily like a lot of uncertainty. They want to know where the pathway is. It doesn't mean they're not experimental. Experimenting doesn't mean they're not going to have failures. But we need to create a much more set platform so that people can operate, make the investments that they're looking to make. So we have a lot of work cut out for us.
Don't we all? Well, thank you so much, Jack, Joe, Mark, and Julie. I so appreciate your time today. I know all of our viewers do as well. We will have information, more follow-up information that will go out to everyone who's attending. So if they'd like to get in touch and get involved in anything that we talked about today, they are able to. Thank you again for your time, everyone. Now we go to JF for closing remarks.
It was a pleasure to have you join us in this important conversation today about accelerating innovation ecosystems in every country across all continents. Entrepreneurs, policymakers, and community leaders are working hard all over the world to build productive and inclusive technology ecosystems that are engine of economic growth and job creation for all of our societies. Since 2012, Startup Genome's research and member network has provided rich insights and guidance to public and private leaders on how to cultivate thriving startup ecosystems and support local entrepreneurs and startups, the #1 engine of job creation and economic growth for more than a decade. Keep in touch with us to stay abreast of the latest research in this space And if you're interested in joining our network as an ecosystem member, please contact Adam Brigu to get more information at adam@startupgenome.com. Thank you so much.